The fog clung to Whitechapel like a shroud that night in 1891, thick and yellow under the flickering gas lamps, carrying the stench of the Thames and uncollected gin bottles. Sergeant Wilkins stumbled over the curb on Durward Street, his lantern swinging wildly, casting jagged shadows on the brick walls slick with rain. He froze, breath-catching, as the beam fell on the crumpled form in the alley's mouth. A man in threadbare workman's clothes, throat slashed ear to ear, his body twisted into an unnatural pose, arms outstretched as if pleading to some invisible tormentor. Pinned to his chest by a rusted dagger was a scrap of newsprint, ink still fresh. "The vampire's kiss shall claim the 18th soul before dawn." Wilkins retched into the gutter, then blew his whistle shrill enough to pierce the pea-soup haze. Within minutes, the alley swarmed with constables, their boots splashing in puddles that mirrored the crimson pool spreading beneath the corpse. Inspector Tobias Gregson pushed through, his frock coat straining over his burly frame, ruddy face set in grim lines beneath bushy side whiskers. He knelt, gloved fingers lifting the paper scrap, eyes narrowing at the lurid prose. "Bloody penny dreadful rubbish," he growled to the sergeant. "Elias Blackwood's latest tripe from that Spitalfields press. 18th victim. Mark my words, it's some madman aping the tales to taunt us." Word spread like fire through dry rags, reaching Baker Street by the time the clock tower chimed 2. In the cluttered sitting room of 221B, Sherlock Holmes lounged in his armchair, the hypodermic syringe glinting on the side table beside a half-smoked shag tobacco pipe. His lean frame, all sharp angles and disheveled dark curls, slumped deeper into velvet cushions, grey eyes half-lidded in chemical haze. The violin lay forgotten on the floor, strings humming faintly from a breeze through the sash window. Idleness gnawed at him worse than hunger these days. No puzzle worthy of his mind since the Paradol Chamber affair 6 months past. Moriarty's shadow had faded, leaving only this void, filled by the 7% solution that dulled the world's banal edges. The door burst open, and Dr. John Watson strode in, his sturdy build cutting through the smoke like a bulwark, neat moustache twitching with urgency. His kind blue eyes, scarred by Afghan sands, fixed on the syringe with familiar worry. "Holmes, for God's sake, another night like this? Mrs. Hudson nearly fainted carrying up your untouched supper. And now this telegram from Gregson, Whitechapel again, a Ripper copycat or worse. They're begging for you." Holmes's piercing gaze sharpened fractionally, the cocaine lending a predatory gleam. He waved a languid hand, voice smooth as polished oak despite the slur at its edges. "Gregson begs? How quaint. The Yard's bulldog reduced to whining pup." "Read it aloud, Watson. Spare me the squint." Watson unfolded the paper, voice steady but laced with the gravel of old wounds. "Murder in Durward Street. Victim posed as in Blackwood's Vampire Chronicles. Dagger, note-quoting tale. 18th such death in a month. Press frenzy. Come at once. 18th. Holmes sat up, needle forgotten, mind igniting like phosphorus. Penny dreadfuls manifesting as corpses. 18 dead. Each death mirroring the lurid serial from Elias Blackwood's Blood and Shadow press in Spitalfields. The printer's rags had flooded East End newsstands, vampires draining urchins, werewolves mauling constables, ghosts throttling lords, all now echoed in gutters and tenements. Superstitious drivel Holmes had dismissed at first report, human malice dressed as curse. Yet the precision unnerved even him. Bodies found precisely as described, published weeks prior. "Intriguing," he murmured, rising with feline grace, shrugging into his ulster. Blackwood's fevered imagination, or a killer with access to the proofs? "Watson, the game is afoot. Fetch my magnifying glass." The hansom cab rattled through fog-choked streets, horse hooves clopping on cobblestones that gleamed like wet bones. Watson gripped the strap, glancing sidelong at his friend, whose aquiline nose pressed to the window, inhaling the city's rot as if it were perfume. "You've been drifting, old chap. This 7% devilry, it's no substitute for purpose. Remember, Irene, the falls we've clambered from. Let this pull you back." Holmes's lips curled, a flicker of the old arrogance masking deeper fracture. "Purpose? The world is but data points, Watson. Sentiment clouds deduction, yet even he felt the stir, a void craving order amid chaos. They arrived at Durward Street as dawn bruised the sky grey, the alley cordoned by constables shivering in greatcoats. Gregson lumbered forward, breath fogging, his ill-fitting frock coat dusted with alley grime. "About time, Mr. Holmes. Press is baying like hounds, calls it Blackwood's curse. 18th victim, poor sod named Tompkins Docker. Slit like the tale says, posed begging the vampire lord. Daggers engraved. See? Blood and shadow." Holmes ignored him, dropping to one knee beside the body. Nostrils flaring at the copper tang mingled with cheap pomade. His long fingers danced over the corpse. Livor mortis setting precisely 4 hours past. No hesitation in the cut. Ink stains on the victim's palms, matching Blackwood's cheap pulp. The pose, arms rigid in supplication, knees buckled, was verbatim from page 7 of the latest chapbook, circulating 10 days prior. "Not copycat," he said softly, almost to himself. "The killer anticipates the print run." Or... Holmes straightened, eyes narrowing. Blackwood himself? Gregson barked a laugh. The printer? Gaunt scribbler peddling horrors to feed his gin habit? Man's terrified, holed up in his shop swearing his stories are cursed. Says the words bleed off the page at night. Watson exchanged a glance with Holmes, sensing the hook sink deeper. Superstition or scheme? The fog seemed to thicken, whispering of secrets coiled in Whitechapel's veins. By midday, they stood outside Blood and Shadow Press, a sagging edifice in Spitalfields Market, its sign creaking above grimy windows stacked with yellowed proofs. The air hummed with the clatter of presses inside, inky and relentless. Elias Blackwood cracked the door, his spectral frame silhouetted, wild greying hair framing hollow cheeks, ink-blackened fingers clutching a smeared spectacles. Age etched him at 45, but fear aged him a decade. "Not another reporter," he rasped, Cockney vowels twisting like fog wisps. "Scotland Yard's plague enough, me tales ain't killing folk, something wicked's using 'em." Holmes stepped forward, voice cutting crisp. "Mr. Blackwood, your vampire claims it's 18th. Unless you penned murder alongside fiction, we have questions. Inside. Now." Blackwood hesitated, eyes darting to shadows pooling in the stairwell behind him, then shuffled aside. The shop reeked of wet paper and lamp oil, shelves groaning under stacks of dreadfuls. The Werewolf of Wapping, Ghosts of the Thames, each cover a garish woodcut of death. In the back room, the printing press loomed like an iron beast, silent now, sheets strewn with half-formed horrors. Watson noted the tremor in Blackwood's hands as he poured watery tea, steam curling like spectres. The printer collapsed into a rickety chair, voice dropping to a haunted whisper. "Started innocent, Governor. Orphans' tales from me urchin days. Sold 'em for halfpenny to escape the workhouse. But 6 months back, first body turns up posed like me, Strangler's Moon. Thought coincidence, then more. 17 now. Me words. They live. Curse of the press, they say. Ink got a hunger." Holmes paced, eyes devouring the chaos, a discarded proof sheet matching the Durward dagger engraving, fresh as yesterday. Deduction word. Blackwood's isolation, debts to Fleet Street sharks, the madness in his gaze. Yet no blood on these hands, only ink. "Prove it fiction, Mr. Holmes," Blackwood pleaded, "or it'll take me next. The finale prints tomorrow. Vampire slays the printer at dawn." Watson felt a chill unrelated to the damp. Holmes's face, usually impassive, betrayed a rare fracture, boredom yielding to obsession, but laced with something raw, a hunger mirroring the killer's. As thunder grumbled distant over the Thames, Holmes pocketed a proof sheet, mind already threading clues. "This ends tonight," he declared. "Watson, to the yard, every dreadful archived. Blackwood, your haunts, your rivals, lies unravel under scrutiny." But as they stepped into the thickening fog, a newsboy's cry pierced. "Extra! 19th slain in Shadwell." Holmes froze, pulse quickening. The vice tightened, stories bleeding into streets and his own demons stirring in the shadows. This story is created by a young creator whose dream is to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you enjoy these tales, subscribing helps more than you know, and he thanks you for it. Dive into mysteries that challenge your mind and reward attention. The fog clung to Holmes like a second skin, cold and insistent, as he scanned the broadsheet's lurid prose under the flickering gas lamp. Shadwell Docks, Body number 19. Throat torn as if by fangs, posed with arms crossed over a wooden stake clutched in rigor-stiff hands. The description matched Blackwood's latest proof sheet to the bloody letter, the vampire's victim from his unfinished tale, Blood on the Thames. Holmes's mind raced, synapses firing like pistol shots in the gloom. Coincidence? No. Elaborate hoax? Possible, but the precision gnawed at him, stirring an unease he hadn't felt since the Baskerville moors. Watson glanced back at Blackwood's print shop, its windows now swallowed by the mist, then at Holmes's taut profile. The detective's grey eyes burned with that familiar intensity, but tonight something sharper edged them, less the thrill of the chase, more a shadow of personal disquiet. Watson knew the signs. Idleness bred the needle, and this case reeked of the unnatural, the kind that tempted Holmes toward his 7% solution. "Why press on?" Watson said, clapping a hand on Holmes's shoulder. "Gregson at the Yard will have the archives. Blackwood's list of haunts first?" Holmes folded the paper with deliberate calm, though his fingers betrayed a slight tremor. "Shadwell first. The body cools while clues breathe. Blackwood waits. He's no killer, but his tongue drips fear like ink." They hailed a hansom cab, the horse's hooves clopping hollow on cobblestones, slick with Thames slime. Inside, the leather seats smelled of stale tobacco and wet wool, the driver muttering about fog devils as he cracked the reins. Holmes leaned forward, violin-calloused fingers steepled, replaying Blackwood's words. Orphan tales turned prophetic. 17 murders, now 19. Each a grotesque tableau from the penny dreadfuls. The Strangler's moon. Victim garroted under a full moon, tongue protruding like the woodcut. Ghosts of the Thames. Drowned man floating with spectral chains. Patterns too perfect for madness alone. Someone fed on Blackwood's nightmares or worse, conjured them. Watson's thoughts drifted to his own scars, the Jezzail bullet in his leg aching with the damp. Afghanistan had taught him men could be monsters without supernatural aid, yet Holmes's silence unnerved him. The detective stared into the fog, as if seeing threads invisible to lesser eyes. Arrived at Shadwell docks as the cab lurched to a halt, the air thick with fish rot and tar. Lanterns bobbed like will-o'-the-wisps where constables cordoned the wharf. Inspector Gregson loomed amid the chaos, his frock coat straining over his burly frame, ruddy face glistening with sweat despite the chill. Side whiskers bristled as he barked orders, his Scotland Yard ambition as palpable as the stench. "Holmes," he grunted, striding over, boots squelching in oily puddles. "Late to the feast. 19th this month and the press howling for my head. Look your fill, this one's a freak show." They ducked under the rope, the crowd's murmurs a low buzz. Curse of the printer, ink demons loose. The body lay on the rotting pier, shrouded in a tarpaulin half pulled back by the wind. Holmes knelt, his deerstalker casting a shadow over the corpse. Middle-aged docker, hollow cheeks like Blackwood's, throat ragged as if savaged by a beast. No blood pooled, drained clean. In his grip, a crude stake whittled from pine, splintered as if self-inflicted in terror. Nearby, a discarded penny dreadful fluttered, pages open to Blackwood's vampire tale, the ink still tacky. Gregson snorted, posed like a stage act. "Blackwood's the scribbler, eh? We'll have him in irons by dawn." "Innocent," Holmes murmured, inhaling the metallic tang of evaporated blood. "Observe, wounds inconsistent with animal attack, hesitation marks, human blade work disguised. The stake's grain matches Spittlefield's timber yards." And this, he plucked the pamphlet free, printed not 12 hours past. "Blackwood's press runs at midnight. This killer anticipates." Watson's stomach turned at the sight, the man's eyes frozen in glassy accusation. He recalled Blackwood's haunted whisper, the tremor in those ink-stained hands. "Governor, prove it fiction." The printer's fear felt genuine, a man unraveling thread by thread. Gregson puffed his chest. "Anticipates? Sounds like confession to me. Debts up to his eyeballs, Fleet Street sharks circling. Rivals, too. That hack Moriarty scribbles under pseudonyms, jealous of sales." Holmes rose, dust from the pier shaking from his ulster. "Moriarty?" The name hung a moment, unbidden. No matter. Watson catalogued the scene. Gregson, double patrols on Blackwood's haunts. The Rat's Nest pub in Whitechapel. Opium dens off Cable Street. I'll trace the pamphlet's distribution. As they worked, foghorns moaned from the Thames, a dirge for the dead. Holmes's mind whirled. Blackwood's isolation bred suspects aplenty, rivals envious of his lurid success, urchins he'd cast aside, even churchfolk decrying his godless tales. Yet the elegance chilled him, the killer not slashing wildly but staging symphonies of death, each murder a chapter illustrated. Watson jotted notes by lantern light, his hand steadying as camaraderie anchored him. Holmes, ever the machine, faltered inwardly. Cocaine whispers tempted in the quiet, 7 drops to sharpen the haze. He crushed the urge, focusing on the puzzle. This transcended crime, it mocked reason, flirted with the abyss where his own voids lurked. Back in the cab to Whitechapel, Holmes brooded. Blackwood claimed innocence born of poverty, urchin hawking tales for halfpennies, now cursed by their bloom into reality. Lies, or a deeper game? They found Blackwood's print shop barred, but a side door ajar, lamplight spilling like blood. Inside, the man hunched over his beastly press, feeding fresh sheets, his wild grey hair stuck with sweat, spectacles fogged, hollow cheeks twitching. "Mr. Holmes?" Blackwood rasped, voice cracking like dry paper. "Saw the extra. Me vampire. It's feeding. Told you. The ink hungers." Holmes scanned the room anew. Stacks of unsold dreadfuls gathering dust, debts scrawled on a ledger. £200 to Silas Crowe of Fleet Street. Crowe, the tempter publisher, demanding the finale or ruin. "Your rivals," Holmes pressed, "who envy your pen. Moriarty's shadow, perhaps?" Blackwood laughed bitterly, a hollow bark. "Moriarty? Ghost name for hacks. No, Gov. It's the stories themselves. First one, me orphan yarn, lad strangled like I wrote. Ignored it. Now they pile, and tonight. Finale prints. Printer drained at dawn in his own shop. Watson felt pity stir, the man's gaunt frame trembling as he clutched a half-set type block. Not madness, but desperation, the kind that forged unlikely allies. Holmes pocketed a fresh proof, vampire looming over the printer's corpse, precisely as Shadwell. "We dismantle this, Blackwood. Your life, or your lies, ends with truth." A knock shattered the tension, urgent, fist like hammer on wood. Gregson burst in, 2 peelers flanking, manacles glinting. "Elias Blackwood, you're nicked for 19 murders. Pamphlet trail leads here, fresh as the blood." Blackwood recoiled, eyes wild behind smudged glass. "No, it's the curse." Holmes stepped between, voice steel. "Inspector, premature. Examine the press. Typeset inverted on the stolen sheet. Impossible for Blackwood alone." Gregson hesitated, ambition warring with doubt. Holmes's reputation weighed heavy. One night he growled, "Prove it, or he's meat." As constables dragged Blackwood to a chair, Holmes paced, mind alight. Seeds planted. Inverted type suggested an insider, perhaps Crowe's spy, but deeper. The murders accelerated, finale looming. His own pulse matched the rhythm, detachment cracking under the weight of what felt perilously close to the supernatural. Watson watched Holmes, seeing the fracture widen. The detective's arc bent toward something human. Vulnerability amid genius. Fog pressed at the windows like eyes, and outside a shadow flitted past the glass. Footsteps faded into the night, carrying the scent of ink and malice. Holmes turned, eyes locking on Watson. The game evolves, someone watches, and dawn nears. The fog clung to the grimy windows of Blackwood's print shop in Whitechapel, like a shroud, thickening as the witching hour approached. Holmes's gaze lingered on the pane where the shadow had vanished, his mind racing through possibilities. Accomplice, rival, or mere vagrant drawn by the commotion. Watson shifted uneasily beside him, the air heavy with the metallic tang of wet ink and the faint, acrid bite of fear sweat from Elias Blackwood, who sat manacled to a splintered chair, his gaunt chest heaving. One night, Gregson had conceded, his burly frame blocking the door like a human barricade. His ruddy face gleamed under the hissing gas lamp, side whiskers twitching with impatience. "Make it count, Holmes, I've got the yard breathing down my neck. And this one's got blood on every page he prints." Holmes nodded curtly, already turning to the massive printing press that dominated the room. Its iron jaws loomed silent now, smeared with yesterday's ink, the type blocks scattered like fallen teeth. He lifted the stolen proof sheet again, holding it to the light. "See here, Watson." The inversion. Letters mirrored as if set by a left-handed ghost, or perhaps a plate recast in haste. Blackwood's hands, he glanced at the printer's ink-blackened fingers, bear the marks of right-handed toil alone. Blackwood lifted his head, spectacles slipping down his hollow nose, voice a rasping whisper. "It's no trick of hands, Mr. Holmes, the tales. They hunger. I wrote the first in '89, a boy orphaned in the fog, throat crushed by shadows. Next morn, little Tommy Finch found the same way in Petticoat Lane. Coincidence, I thought. Fed the fire with more, vampire draining the life from Shadwell docks. And there it was, body pale as milk in the mud. Watson leaned in, his army surgeon's instincts stirring pity amid skepticism. Man, you're spinning nightmares into nooses. How many presses in this warren? Anyone slip in under cover of night?" The printer's wild grey hair fell across his eyes as he shook his head. Alone most nights, save for deliveries. But T. Crow, that snake from Fleet Street, he pushes for bloodier ends. Last week he stormed in, fat fists pounding the desk. "Finish the series, Elias, or I'll bury you in debtor's prison." His parlour reeks of cigar smoke and ambition, up in those opulent rooms overlooking the Thames. Holmes's eyes narrowed, filing the name away. Crow. The tempter with a motive wrapped in velvet, yet the precision, too neat for mere plagiarism. He paced the creaking floorboards, violin case bumping his calf, a reminder of idler days lost to this enigma. His mind, usually a steel trap of logic, snagged on the supernatural whispers Blackwood peddled. Curses were for the superstitious, the weak-willed, but 18 dead, each echoing page to corpse mocked pure reason. A flicker of unease stirred in his chest, not fear, but the irritant of the unexplained, grinding against his detachment. Outside, hooves clattered on cobblestones, a hansom cab rattling past, its lantern cutting yellow gashes through the murk. Gregson snorted, tugging his frock coat straight. "Superstitions for vicars, not coppers. I've warrants brewing. Pamphlets found at every scene, Blackwood's mark clear as day." "Then let's test it," Holmes said sharply, snapping open his pocket watch. 4 hours to dawn. Watson, fetch the lantern and my kit from the cab. Blackwood, recount the finale, every grisly detail." The printer swallowed hard, chains rattling softly. "It's the Ripper's heir, see? A phantom in top hat and cape, gutting nobles in Mayfair drawing rooms. Last victim, a lord with his eyes gouged, tongue severed, left clutching a penny, dreadful, smeared in his own blood. Prince tomorrow, unless the curse claims me first." He trailed off, voice cracking. "I've prayed in St. Mary's shadows, begged forgiveness for feeding the dark. But grace don't answer ink-stained wretches." Watson returned, medical bag in hand, brow furrowed. "Prayer? You're a long way from rock bottom if that's your plea, Elias. Holmes, this reeks of opium dreams or worse." Holmes ignored the barb, kneeling by the press to pry loose a type block. Cocaine whispers tempted his veins, the 7% solution a siren for clarity amid chaos. But not now. He traced the letters, deduction weaving a fragile net. Residue here. Fresh oil, not Blackwood's cheap lamp black. An intruder, tampering under nose. Crow? Or deeper, a syndicate peddling terror for profit. A sudden thud echoed from the alley, wood splintering, then silence. Gregson drew his truncheon, barking at the peelers. "Check it!" The constables vanished into the fog, boots splashing puddles. Holmes straightened, pulse quickening. The watcher returns. "Watson, guard Blackwood." As Watson positioned himself, revolver steady, Holmes slipped to the back door, deerstalker shadowing his sharp features. The alley reeked of rotting fish from the Thames and horse dung, walls slick with soot. Footprints, small, hesitant, led to an overturned crate, its slats cracked. Inside, a crumpled pamphlet. The finale's proof, inverted type glaring up like an accusation. He pocketed it, mind alight. Planted evidence or bait? A child's print. Urchin spy. The murders accelerated, mirroring Blackwood's deadline, as if the city itself scripted the horror. Back inside, Gregson growled. "Nothing but rats." "Your game's fraying, Holmes." "Not fraying. unraveling another's design, Holmes replied coolly. Blackwood, your rivals envy the sales. Crow demands the end. But who profits from your neck in a noose? Fleet Street fears sensation without you. The printer's eyes darted, haunted. There's Mary, my sister in Spitalfields. She warned me. Stop the tales, find honest work. Visit Sundays after chapel, hands rough from laundry, eyes full of that quiet faith. Said the devil dances in made-up blood. I laughed then. Now. Watson felt a pang, memories of Afghan sands and lost comrades surfacing. Faith had anchored him through bullets. Holmes thrived on intellect alone. Yet here, in this ink-choked den, lines blurred. Elias, hold to her words. Rock bottom's no stranger to second chances. Dawn crept grey fingers under the door, gas lamps flickering low. Gregson checked his watch. Time's up. To the cells with him. Holmes blocked the path again, voice edged with rare urgency. One lead remains, Crow's parlour. Permit me there, Inspector, or yard blindness claims another innocent. Gregson wavered, ambition clashing with Holmes's unerring record. Dawn raid, then. But if it's smoke. The peelers hauled Blackwood up, his frail form sagging. As they exited into the fog, Holmes caught Watson's eye. The detachment cracked further. This case clawed at certainties, hinting at forces beyond pipes and footprints. Crow awaited, and with him, perhaps the thread to pull the curse apart, or bind them all. But as the party dispersed toward waiting hansoms, a scream pierced the mist from Shadwell docks, raw, gurgling, echoing the printer's tales too perfectly. Another body. Holmes' world, heart traitor that it was, pounding. The game surged forward, and dawn brought not light but deeper shadow. This story is created by a young creator whose dream is to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you enjoy these tales, subscribing helps more than you know, and he thanks you for it. No, wait, that was for the start. Here at the end of this chapter's grip, comment if you've known someone who found their way back. The fog clung to Shadwell docks like a shroud, woven from the Thames' own breath, thick and briny, carrying the rot of fish guts and tarred ropes. Holmes plunged into it first, his long strides cutting through the mist, coattails whipping like dark wings. Watson followed close, revolver heavy in his pocket, heart thudding from the raw scream that still echoed in his ears, gurgling, desperate, cut short as if by a blade. Gregson barked orders to his peelers, lanterns swinging wild, casting grotesque shadows on stacked crates and swaying hulks of moored barges. They found her slumped against a piling, skirts sodden and twisted, pale hands clutching at nothing. A dockside whore, by her rouged lips and cheap finery, throat slashed in a ragged arc that mirrored the woodcut horrors from Blackwood's latest shilling shocker, The Ripper's Return. Holmes knelt, unperturbed by the gathering crowd of bleary-eyed sailors murmuring prayers or curses. His grey eyes narrowed, fingers hovering over the wound without touch. The cut was precise, upward from left to right, left-handed work. But the hesitation marks, 3 shallow probes before the deep plunge, spoke of rage, not skill. Not Blackwood's hand, Holmes murmured to Watson, voice low amid the constable's shouts. The printer's frail grip couldn't muster this force. See the bruising on her wrists fresh from a heavier man, and the posy of wilted violets pinned to her bodice, straight from page 17 of the tale, where the phantom killer leaves his mark for the fallen Magdalene. Watson swallowed bile, the metallic tang in the air turning his stomach. Afghanistan had hardened him to carnage, but this felt profane, as if fiction had clawed its way into flesh. Gregson loomed over, ruddy face paling. Bloody hell. Holmes, 18 now. Fleet Street'll have my badge if this curse runs riot. Blackwood's in irons, but if his scribbles are summoning devils. Superstition, Inspector, Holmes snapped, rising fluid as a cat, though a flicker crossed his features. Doubt, unbidden. The violets were common enough from costermongers, but the exact placement. He shook it off, mind racing through deductions. Lead waiting in her pocket. Payment from a John, perhaps Crow's man, silencing loose lips. We press on to the parlour. This corpse buys Blackwood time, not a noose. The hansoms rattled over cobblestones toward Fleet Street as dawn bled pink through the smog, horse hooves clattering like bones. Watson glanced at Holmes, who stared out unseeing, violin calyces drumming silent on his knee. You'd think it routine, old chap, but this one's gnawing at you. The story's bleeding into streets. It's as if London's under a pall. Holmes's lips thinned. Routine is my armour, Watson. Yet the coincidences compound. Blackwood's tales published weeks before each outrage, details too vivid for prophecy. Someone feeds him truths disguised as fancy, or... He trailed off, the violinist's mind recoiling from the abyss. No, patterns emerge from data, not ether. Crow's parlour nestled in a Georgian terrace off the Strand. Gas lamps, still hissing through daylight, crept in. The publisher, Silas Crow, greeted them in a velvet smoking jacket, corpulent frame filling the doorway, gold watch chain glinting over his paunch. His eyes, small and shrewd like a ferret's, darted from Holmes to Gregson. "Gentlemen, to what do I owe this dawn intrusion? Brandy? My tales sell out. No need for scandal." Holmes swept past without pause, into the opulent room redolent of cigar ash and oiled mahogany. Bookshelves groaned under garish penny dreadfuls, woodcuts of screaming damsels and cloaked fiends. Your demands for Blackwood's finale drove him to desperation, Mr. Crow. Tales of murders mirroring reality, profitable until the noose tightens. Crow chuckled, pouring amber liquid with steady hands. Elias is a genius, mad as a hatter. His Blood Harvest flew off presses after the first Whitechapel slaying. Readers crave the chill. I nudge plots for sales, true, add a twist here, a gore there. But prophecy? Poppycock. He's the scribbler. I just print. Gregson leaned in, whiskers bristling. Dockside lass this morning, throat open like your woodcut whore. Violets and all. Blackwood rots in cells, but whispers say you supplied the ink. And motives. Crow's jowls quivered, feigning affront. Libel. I've rivals aplenty. Aldgate Press undercuts my price. Elias owes me galleys. Delay costs thousands. Why kill my golden goose? Holmes paced, eyes alighting on a sideboard, fresh violets in a vase, petals bruised. Delivered this morning from Shadwell florist, and these proofs, Blackwood's unfinished Phantom's Key, describing a splash in the Thames tonight. Convenient. Watson noted the man's pallor deepen, sweat beading despite the chill. Holmes was a hound on scent, but Crow held firm, gesturing to a framed broadsheet. See, my empire thrives on sensation, not slaughter. Elias dreamed it up, urchin tales from his Spitalfields days. Ask his sister Mary, she launders my linens, pious soul warning him off the devil's quill. The name hung, a thread Holmes seized. Mary Blackwood. We'll speak with her. Gregson searched the premises, vials of cocaine. No, ink samples, perhaps laced with blood for authenticity. Crow blustered as peelers rummaged, overturning folios. Lies. But Holmes already drifted to the window, overlooking the Thames' murky flow. Watson joined him, voice soft. Silas reeks of guilt, yet the murders predate his pushes. What if Blackwood's curse is real? Not magic, but a copyist in the shadows. Holmes gripped the sill, knuckles white. Shadows yield to light, Watson. Yet this, a detachment phrase. In Baker Street, puzzles dissolve. Here they multiply, echoing faiths I dismiss. Mary's chapel words, perhaps they anchor where reason slips. A peeler called from the study, Inspector. Fresh galleys, hidden. The sister's secret. Describes Mary Blackwood finding a body in Spitalfields Market, tomorrow's date. Crow paled to ash. Planted, Elias's hand spiteful. Gregson clapped irons on the publisher, not so golden now. But as they dragged Crow out, Holmes lingered, picking a violet petal from the vase. Its scent, faint and sickly sweet, matched the dockside posy. Not coincidence. Someone orchestrates, feeds Blackwood scraps of truth, prints the lure, kills to match. Crow, or deeper? They emerged into Fleet Street's bustle, newsboys hawking extras on the Shadwell slaying. Watson felt the city's pulse quicken, fog lifting to reveal a London alive with whispers of the curse. Holmes hailed a hansom for Spitalfields, eyes stormy. to Mary. If her faith steals her brother, it may unsteel the killer. Mary Blackwood lived in a cramped tenement off Brick Lane, air heavy with stewed cabbage and coal smoke. She met them at the door, apron dusted with soap, face lined like old parchment, eyes clear with that Sunday chapel light. "Elias?" she asked, voice threadbare. "The cells? He'll not last? Lungs weak from print dust." Holmes softened imperceptibly. "Your brother lives, miss. Accused but innocent thus far. Your warnings, devil in the tales. Did he heed?" She wrung her hands. Glancing at a worn Bible on the table, "He laughed, sir, sold his soul for shillings. But last Mass Father O'Malley spoke grace, none beyond reach. I pray for him, and Crow too. Greed's the true demon." Watson warmed to her quiet strength, reminiscent of nurses in the war wards. Remarkable woman. Holmes nodded, probing. Did Elias share sources? Murders too true to invent. Shadows crossed her features. Whispers from the docks, sailors' yarns of a ghost ship, bodies afloat. He twisted them lurid. But Silas pushed, more blood, or no pay. Mary for laundry kept us fed. A knock rattled the door, urgent, frantic. Gregson burst in, face grim. Holmes, Blackwood's escaped cells, vanished in the fog shift change. Warder swears a phantom decoy. Holmes's composure cracked, a rare curse escaping. The struggle deepens. If Blackwood runs to old haunts, or worse, Mary's peril foretold, he's bait now. As shouts rose from the street, a shadow flitted past the window, gone in the alley's gloom. Holmes bolted after, Watson and Mary close, the chase pulling them into Spittlefield's labyrinth where market stalls shuttered against the rising dread. The printer fled, but towards salvation or slaughter? The answer lurked in the fog, tightening its grip. Holmes plunged into the Spittlefield's alley, coattails whipping like dark wings in the chill wind that sliced through the fog. His boots splashed through puddles thick with market runoff, rotting cabbage and horse dung, each step echoing sharper than a gunshot in the narrow passage. Watson followed, heart pounding from the sudden eruption, his revolver heavy in his pocket, while Mary Blackwood hesitated at the threshold, her call thin and desperate. "Elias, don't run from grace." But the shadow had melted into the labyrinth of Brick Lane's backways, where silk-weavers' looms clacked faintly behind grimy windows, and the air hung heavy with the tang of dyes and despair. Holmes paused at a fork, nostrils flaring as he caught the acrid whiff of cheap tobacco mingled with printer's ink, the fugitive's signature scent. "Left," he murmured, voice a blade cutting the murk. "The old haunts pull him." They darted left, past a cluster of urchins huddled over a dying fire, their eyes wide as saucers at the sight of the deerstalker silhouette. Watson glanced back. Mary's silhouette shrank against the tenement door, her hands clasped in silent prayer. Poor woman torn between blood and belief. Holmes pressed on, relentless, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. Escape time to the fog's ebb, Warder's phantom tale no coincidence. Someone orchestrated this. Crow, or the curse's architect? The alley spat them into a courtyard ringed by sagging timber frames, gas lamps flickering like wary eyes. There, Elias Blackwood stumbled against a rain barrel, chest heaving, his gaunt frame doubled over as coughs racked him, wet and ragged from years of inhaling leaded fumes. He clutched a crumpled broadsheet, ink-smeared fingers trembling. Holmes seized his arm, grip iron yet precise. "Enough flight, Blackwood. Your tales bleed into reality. Run. Hand you author your own noose." Elias jerked free, spectacles askew, wild eyes darting like a cornered rat. "Leave me be, detective. The devil's in the print. My words summon him." Silas knew. He fed the beast for profit. Now 18 souls. And mine next. I saw it last night in the cells, fog whispering my death scene. Watson stepped forward, voice steady as a surgeon's scalpel. "Calm yourself, man. Superstition clouds reason. Tell us true. What sources twisted into those pages?" Elias slumped against the wall, breath rasping. "Sailors from the Thames docks first. Ghost ship yarns, bodies bloated, throats slit in ritual. I spiced 'em lurid for the bloodthirsty mob. But then the Shadwell maid washed up exact as scripted, eyes gouged, tongue pinned with a penny. I burned the plates, swore off. Crow laughed, paid double for sequels, said the curse sold sheets like opium. Holmes's grey eyes narrowed, piecing the mosaic. Crow, the Fleet Street tempter. Where does he lair? Blackwood spat blood-flecked phlegm. The print shop, Thorne's Press, off Petticoat Lane. But beware, he's woven into the weave, sir. Last visit he muttered of a master printer from Whitechapel's old blood days, one who bound souls in binding thread. A low rumble grew, boots on cobble, Gregson's bull voice barking orders. The inspector rounded the corner, half a dozen peelers in tow, lanterns swinging like pendulums of judgment. There he is. Seize the scribbler. Holmes raised a hand, authoritative. Stand down, Gregson. He's our oracle, not corpse. To the yard with him, but under my watch. Gregson snorted, ruddy cheeks flushing deeper. Your watch? He slipped custody once, twice his conspiracy. And you, Holmes, meddling where yard leads suffice. The exchange crackled with old rivalry, Holmes's lip curling faintly. Your leads chase ghosts, mine dissect them. Blackwood stays free till I say. Mary emerged from the gloom then, breathless, shawl clutched tight against the damp that seeped into bones. Elias, oh brother. Father O'Malley waits at St. Mary's. Confession cleans the slate. Elias recoiled, yet his eyes softened at her touch. Mary, the priest's grace against Crow's greed. But the words I birthed, they live, clawing back. Gregson hauled him upright roughly, but Holmes intervened, steering the group toward a waiting growler cab. To Thorne's Press, all. Night deepens. Truths hide in Press's shadows. The cab rattled through Whitechapel's veins, wheels juddering over uneven stones, past gin palaces spilling raucous laughter, and the wail of a street preacher decrying end times. Watson sat beside Elias, noting the man's shivers, not mere cold but the fever of a soul at war. You've a gift, Blackwood. Tales that grip the city. Why let fear claim it? Elias stared at his ink-stained hands, voice hollow. Gift? Curse. Childhood scraps in the workhouse, dreaming escapes on paper. Rose to penny king on gore, but each plot point manifests. Now the Ripper's echo stalks anew. Crow knew the source, pressed me to dig deeper, unearth the real vein. Holmes leaned forward, violinist's fingers steepled. The real vein. Speak it. A dockside cult. Whispers Elias. Old pagan rite, smuggling opium and secrets from the east. Bodies marked with printer's devil, horned sigil inked on skin. Crow dabbled, funded my rags from their haul, said it was fiction's fuel. The cab lurched to halt before Thorne's Press, a hulking edifice squatting on Petticoat Lane like a drunken giant. Soot-blackened bricks wept moisture, windows blind with grime. The sign creaking, Thorne's Dreadfuls, thrills for a penny. Door ajar, a sliver of lamplight bleeding out, mingled with the metallic bite of fresh ink and something fouler, decay. Gregson drew his truncheon. Breach it. Holmes slipped ahead, silent as mist, pushing the door. Inside, chaos reigned. Overturned galleys, type scattered like teeth from a broken jaw, air thick with oil and rot. At the center, a body sprawled. Silas Crow, throat laid open ear to ear, a penny clutched in rigid fingers, eyes staring blank at the ceiling beams. Watson knelt, pulse checked instinctively. Nil. Fresh, not an hour cold. Same right, tongue severed, pinned nearby with a bloody quill. Elias gasped, staggering back. My next chapter. Exactly. The tempter slain by his own greed. Holmes scanned the room, gaze alighting on a half-set form, words forming. The printer's doom betrayer gored by horned shadow. Unfinished, but prophetic. Gregson bellowed for constables. Murder at the press. Blackwood, you're cooked. No, Holmes snapped. The killer authors faster than we chase. Crow silenced his source. Elias lives to testify. Mary crossed herself, whispering a rosary bead prayer amid the horror. Grace amid gore, father would say, but whose hand wields the blade? As constables swarmed, Holmes pocketed a sigil-etched woodblock, mind racing. The cult stirs. Faith's veil thins. Blackwood's arc bends toward light or abyss. Outside, fog rolled thicker, swallowing Petticoat Lane, a child's cry piercing the veil, 18th victim. Or lure to the true lair. Holmes turned to Watson, resolve hardening. We unearth the master printer tonight, or London drowns in printed blood. The struggle's heart beats darker. The fog clung to Petticoat Lane like a shroud woven from the Thames' own breath, thick enough to muffle the clatter of approaching constables and turn every shadow into a suspect. Holmes led the way. Deerstalker pulled low, his hawkish profile cutting through the murk as if defying its grasp. Watson followed close, revolver heavy in his coat pocket, the weight a grim comfort against the night's unraveling madness. Elias Blackwood stumbled behind, his ink-stained hands trembling, spectacles fogged not just from the chill but from the terror etching deeper lines into his gaunt face. Inspector Gregson barked orders to his men, lantern beams slicing futilely at the gloom. But Holmes ignored them all, drawn inexorably toward that piercing child's cry echoing from the alley's throat. It came again, fainter now, a wail laced with desperation that twisted Watson's gut. Not just any cry, this one carried the raw edge of abandonment, the kind he'd heard too often on Afghan battlefields where hope bled out into sand. Holmes paused at a narrow mouth between sagging tenements, the walls slick with soot and rivulets of rainwater. "Sniff the air," he murmured. Beyond ink and rot, opium smoke mingled with candle wax and something sweeter, like overripe fruit fermenting in sin. Elias clutched his coat, whispering hoarsely, "That's from the Devil's Den, down by the old printworks ruins, where the cultists gather printing their blasphemies on stolen sheets. Crow took me there once, laughing as they inked the sigil on my skin, said it bound the stories to flesh." Holmes's grey eyes narrowed, the woodblock sigil burning in his pocket like a live coal. "Then that's our thread. Lead on, Mr. Blackwood, before the weaver pulls it taut." They plunged into the alley, boots splashing through puddles that reflected gaslight in fractured pools. The cry guided them, rising and falling like a siren's lure, past overflowing gutters where rats scurried like accomplices fleeing a crime. Watson's breath came steady, but his mind raced. Holmes was pushing too hard. That cocaine-fueled intensity flickering behind his composure. The detective's detachment, once a shield, now cracked under the weight of murders scripted from pulp. How many more before reason bowed to something darker? The alley spat them into a courtyard hemmed by crumbling warehouses, the air turning fetid with the stench of the nearby leather tanneries. At its heart squatted the Devil's Den, a derelict chapel converted to vice, its steeple jagged against the sky, stained glass shattered into devilish mosaics. Flickering light seeped from beneath a warped door, accompanied by murmurs and the rhythmic thud of a hand press. The child's cry sharpened, trapped within. Gregson signaled his men to fan out, truncheons ready, but Holmes waved them back. "Subtlety first, Inspector. A battering ram announces the hounds. We prefer the fox's cunning." Elias hesitated, his hollow cheeks paling further. "Inside. They've the master printer. Not man, but machine-possessed. My tales fed it, but Crow's greed starved the beast." Holmes pressed a finger to his lips, slipping to a side window shrouded in rags. Peering through a tear, he beheld a chamber lit by tallow candles guttering in iron sconces. Figures huddled around a massive wooden press, its levers slick with oil, platens stained crimson. Half a dozen men and women, faces hooded, inked the horned sigil onto broadsheets that seemed to writhe in the flamelight. At the center, a child no older than 8, ragged, tear-streaked, bound to a stool, forced to ink pages with tiny shaking hands. And overseeing it all, a towering form in clerical robes, face obscured by a porcelain mask etched with infernal runes. The master printer, intoning in a voice like grinding gears. The 18th tale unfolds. The detective falls, tales consume the teller. Watson's blood chilled. Holmes, targeted now, we must... A twig snapped under Gregson's boot. The door flew open, cultists spilling out like ink from a spilled pot, knives glinting. Ambush. Chaos erupted. Watson fired twice, bullets whining past a lunging figure to splinter stone. Holmes whirled, violinist's fingers clamping her assailant's wrist, twisting until bone cracked with a wet snap. Elias, cornered against the wall, swung a loose brick, felling one with a guttural cry. My stories. My curse, end it. Gregson waded in, truncheon rising and falling, but numbers pressed. A blade grazed Watson's arm, hot pain blooming as he clubbed the attacker down. Holmes fought like deduction incarnate, parrying, predicting strikes before they landed, yet a hooded woman slipped past, hurling a vial that shattered at his feet, releasing choking fumes of opium-laced powder. Coughing, vision blurring, Holmes staggered. The mask, the printer advanced, voice booming. Fiction births fact. Your reason is but paper for our press. Elias lunged then, wild-eyed, tackling the masked figure. They grappled, rolling into the press, levers jamming as bodies tangled. Watson hauled Holmes clear, the detective gasping, eyes watering but mind alight. The sigil, destroy it. Gregson bellowed victory as constables overwhelmed the cultists, binding them amid screams of defiance. But the masked one writhed free momentarily, mask cracking to reveal not a fiend, but a woman, severe features twisted in fanatic zeal, grey hair escaping a coif. Sister Agatha, Elias breathed, horror dawning. From the orphanage. She commissioned my first dreads, whispered the rites. Faith corrupted to fuel the print. Agatha spat blood, laughing madly. 18 dead and Holmes next. The tales demand tribute. Holmes, recovering, knelt beside her as irons clamped on. Your machine prints no more. But why? Superstition or profit in panic? Her eyes gleamed. Both. Blackwood's gift, Crow's coin, your hubris. God prints in blood. We merely set the type. Dragged away, she vanished into the fog with her flock, but not before Holmes snatched a broadsheet from the press. Chapter 18, The Detective's Doom, illustrated with his own likeness, throat slashed by quill. Back on Petticoat Lane, as dawn's grey fingers clawed the horizon, the group slumped against Thorne's press wall. Elias wept openly, the weight of complicity crushing him. My words killed them. Am I damned? Holmes placed a hand on his shoulder, rare warmth in the gesture. Words are ink until acted upon, Mr. Blackwood. You've turned the page. But the master press eludes us. Agatha's lair holds more. Watson bandaged his wound, the sting a reminder of fragility. And Mary, she'll worry. Faith kept her steady last night. Perhaps it's our anchor now. Gregson grunted, lighting a pipe. Promotion slips further. But you've a nose for it, Holmes. What's next? The detective stared into the thinning fog, broadsheet crumpling in his fist. The orphanage, where cries lure the lost. There, the final form sets, or we become the tale. Elias nodded, a spark of resolve piercing despair. For the child. For redemption's proof. As they dispersed, a distant bell tolled from the chapel ruins, not mourning but warning. The struggle deepened, faith and reason entwining like type and ink. Yet in the quiet aftermath, Holmes felt the first tremor in his ironclad logic, a whisper of grace amid the gore. If this story has gripped you, hit the like button. It helps reach more people who would love this. But the orphanage shadows loomed larger, hiding not just orphans, but the 19th victim's script. The fog clung to Petticoat Lane like a shroud, as Holmes led the way toward St. Jude's orphanage, its iron gates looming through the murk just beyond the sprawl of Whitechapel tenements. Dawn had broken, but the light was feeble, filtered through soot-stained clouds that hung low over the east end. Each step echoed with the weight of the night before. 18 dead. Agatha's mad laughter still ringing in their ears, and now this broadsheet clutched in Holmes's fist, depicting his own throat opened by a quill's edge. Elias Blackwood trailed close, his ink-stained hands trembling. The gaunt printer's face etched with a guilt that no dawn could wash away. Watson walked beside him, revolver heavy in his coat pocket, while Gregson brought up the rear, his burly frame huffing against the chill. Holmes paused at the gates, rusted and bent, the sign above warped by years of damp. St. Jude's Home for Lost Children. Founded in the cholera years, It squatted on the fringe of Spitalfields, a squat brick edifice with barred windows like watchful eyes and a chimney belching faint smoke from some inner hearth. The air carried the sour tang of unwashed linens and boiled cabbage, mingled with something sharper. Fear, perhaps, or the metallic bite of fresh ink. He tested the latch. It gave with a groan, swinging inward on protesting hinges. Inside, the courtyard was a muddied square ringed by skeletal play yards, swings dangling limp in the breeze. Children's voices drifted from within, not joyful but subdued, like echoes from a dream half remembered. Holmes' grey eyes scanned the shadows, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. Footprints too fresh in the mud leading to a side door smeared with what might be printer's black. Blackwood whispered hoarsely, his voice cracked from weeping. This place. I wrote of it once. Orphans lured by cries, fed to the press in the cellar. Fiction, Holmes. It has to be. But Holmes's aquiline nose twitched at the scent of damp paper and oil. Fiction bleeds into fact here, Mr. Blackwood. Observe, the window panes bear smudges of reversed type, as if broadsheets were proofed against the glass. Gregson snorted, his ruddy cheeks flushing in the cold. Bloody nursery rhymes turning butcher's work. If there's a press down there, it's yard business now. They pushed through the heavy oak door into a dim hallway, lined with pegs holding threadbare coats. The walls peeled with faded murals of biblical scenes. David slaying Goliath. But the giant's face blurred into something grotesque, eyes inked with fresh fury. A matron emerged from a side room, her face a map of worry lines under a starched cap, apron dusted with flour. Mr. Holmes? The note said you'd come. The children. They're restless. Whispers of ghosts in the walls. Holmes inclined his head, his deerstalker casting a shadow over his piercing gaze. Mrs. Harrow, I presume, tell us of the cries that lure the lost. Her eyes widened, hands knotting in her apron. How did you— It's the fog, sir. Nights like these, we hear them from the old chapel ruins next door. Pleading voices, calling names. One lad vanished last week, little Tommy Finch. Left his bed empty, door ajar. Watson felt a pang, his army surgeon's heart stirred by the fragility of it all. Poor child. And no sign. None, doctor. Just this found under his pillow. She pressed a crumpled scrap into Holmes's palm, a snippet of Penny Dreadful. Chapter 19. The Orphans' Feast, with woodcut orphans marching into a maw of machinery. Elias recoiled, his hollow cheeks paling further. My hand. Those cuts are mine. The compositor's mark. 3 slashes for Thorne's press. But I burned the plates. Holmes pocketed the scrap, his voice steady steel. Plates can be recast, Mr. Blackwood. Lead is plentiful in Whitechapel. Lead us to the cellar. Mrs. Harrow hesitated, then nodded toward a scullery door. Mind the children. They're at prayers. The group descended narrow stairs, lantern light from Watson's hand dancing on rough stone walls slick with condensation. The air grew thick, laced with the acrid reek of molten type and wet pulp. At the bottom a vast chamber unfolded, Thorne's hidden satellite press, forms locked and ready, inked rollers gleaming. Stacks of broadsheets towered like tombstones, each titled The Detective's Doom. Holmes's likeness repeated in lurid detail. Gregson cursed under his breath, drawing his truncheon. Satan's printing house. Look, fresh run, still warm. Holmes knelt by the master form, fingers tracing the locked type. Here the seed planted early, Blackwood's tales, Agatha's rights, Crow's gold. But the motive twists deeper. Not mere profit, but a faith in the word made flesh. Stories as scripture, demanding blood sacrifice. A child's cry pierced the gloom from above, sharp and terrified. They bolted upstairs, bursting into the chapel wing where thin-faced orphans huddled on benches, Mrs. Harrow clutching a whimpering boy of perhaps 8. Tommy. No, sir. Billy. He saw them. In the fog, cloaked figures chanting, dragging shadows toward the ruins. Elias dropped to his knees beside the boy, spectacles slipping down his nose. What shadows, lad? Speak true. Billy's eyes, wide as saucers, fixed on the printer. Ink men, sir, faces black as sin, mouths full of type. They sang your story, mister. the one where the writer feeds the press his own heart. Holmes' mind raced, logic fraying at the edges. Superstition or scheme, yet the boy's terror was palpable, unfeigned. Watson laid a hand on Holmes's arm, his kind blue eyes steady. Faith sees what reason blinds itself to, old friend. Mary prays for us even now. Perhaps there's grace in these cries. Gregson paced, side whiskers bristling. Enough gab. We'll search the ruins at dusk, flush 'em out. But Holmes held up a hand, spotting a loose floorboard in the corner. He pried it up, revealing a hidden cache. Agatha's journal bound in cracked leather, pages filled with scrawled rites. Entry after entry chronicled the killings, each murder mirroring Blackwood's plots, timed to the lunar fogs, offered to the Word Eternal, a deity born of print and panic. Elias snatched it, flipping pages with shaking hands. My words, twisted into this. But here, Crow's name underlined. He funded it all, not for coin, but to bury his own sin. An orphan boy he drowned years back. Body in the Thames, the tales avenge him. Holmes snatched it back, voice low. Vengeance scripted as curse. Crow tempts you back to the pen, Blackwood, to complete the canon. Resist, and the tale breaks. But as he spoke, a low rumble echoed from the ruins outside. Type clacking like bones, voices rising in chant. The group spilled into the fog-shrouded yard, orphanage lamps flickering behind. The chapel ruins stood adjacent, blackened stones from a long-ago fire, ivy choking the arches. Shadows moved within, cloaked figures circling a makeshift press powered by treadmill orphans, ghostly pale faces turned to the work. One figure turned, Agatha, her mad eyes locking on Holmes. Come, detective, your chapter awaits. Quill or throat? Holmes stepped forward, broadsheet unfurling like a challenge. Your God-Prince lies, madam. Ink dries, truth endures. But Watson saw the doubt flicker in his friend's eyes, the first crack in the fortress of reason. Elias gripped a loose stone, resolve hardening his spectral frame. No more pages turn on my soul. Gregson charged with a bellow, truncheon raised as the flock scattered into the mist. Fists flew, cloaks torn, but Agatha slipped away, her laughter trailing like smoke. In the fray, Holmes seized a former plate, Chapter 19, half set. Smash it, Blackwood. End your complicity. Elias hesitated, the weight of redemption crushing him, then brought the stone down. Type scattered like shattered teeth, the press grinding to a halt. Yet as silence fell, Billy's cry rang out anew from the orphanage door. Not ghosts, the real lure. A new broadsheet fluttered from his hand, undiscovered. Chapter 20. The Printer's Reckoning. Holmes stared at the dispersing fog, logic trembling. The struggle clawed deeper, grace whispering through the cracks, but the ruins hid one final secret, a hidden chamber, pulsing with the heart of the curse. Fog clung to the blackened stones of the chapel ruins like a shroud, thick and unyielding, carrying the acrid tang of wet earth and charred wood from the long-ago blaze. Sherlock Holmes knelt amid the scattered type, his long fingers sifting through the jumbled letters as if they held the key to unraveling not just the curse, but the fraying edges of his own certainty. The former plate lay shattered at Elias Blackwood's feet, its leaden fragments glinting faintly under the orphanage lantern's wavering glow. Elias stood frozen, chest heaving, the loose stone still clutched in his ink-stained hand, its weight now an anchor pulling him towards something unnameable, freedom or the abyss. Watson approached cautiously, his sturdy frame casting a broad shadow over the debris. Holmes, he murmured, his voice rough from the night's shouts and the chill air that seeped into his bones. We've stopped the press, scattered the flock, but that cry, Billy's real enough. And this new sheet. Holmes rose swiftly, snatching the broadsheet from Watson's outstretched hand. Chapter 20. The Printer's Reckoning. The title stared back in bold, dripping type, the illustration a spectral printer hunched over his machine, quill poised above a throat-slit page. Elias, look at this. Your hand or theirs? Elias shook his head violently, wild greying hair whipping across his hollow cheeks. Not mine. I swear on the Thames that took my sins. Crow's work. That devil in gentleman's cloth. He plants them. Makes it see my author the doom. But smashing that plate, it felt like breaking my own chains. Inspector Gregson lumbered up, rubbing his bruised knuckles, his ruddy face flushed beneath bushy side whiskers. Good smash, printer. But Agatha's lot melted into the fog like rats, and this? He jabbed a thick finger at the sheet. Another prophecy? 18 dead now, you say. We'll drag the lot to the yard come dawn. Holmes folded the broadsheet precisely, tucking it into his greatcoat. Prophecies are for charlatans, Gregson. This is orchestration, Crow's funding, Agatha's zeal, Blackwood's tales as the spark. But the hidden chamber Watson glimpsed earlier. That's our next move. Logic demands we probe its heart. Elias's spectacles slipped down his nose, smudged lenses reflecting the lantern light like fractured mirrors. The chamber? Beneath the altar ruins. I hid it years back, when the fire took the chapel. Stored forbidden sheets there. Ones too dark, even for penny dreadfuls. If the curse pulses from anywhere. They moved as one toward the ivy-choked archway, boots crunching over rubble, the fog parting reluctantly to reveal a jagged stone slab, half covered in moss. Billy hovered at the orphanage threshold, his small face pale, clutching a lantern that trembled in his grip. "Mr. Holmes, sir." Whispers from below, like pages turning in the dark. Holmes nodded curtly, his piercing grey eyes scanning the slab. "Watson, your medical bag. Pry bar if you've one. Gregson, flank us." "Blackwood." Elias stepped forward, resolve etching deeper lines into his gaunt features. "My sin, my key." He knelt, tracing familiar grooves in the stone, fingers remembering the latch he'd forged in desperation. With a grinding rasp, the slab shifted, revealing a yawning black maw, stale air rushing up laced with mildew and the faint metallic bite of old ink. They descended single file, lanterns casting erratic pools of yellow against damp walls slick with condensation. The stairs spiraled tightly, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the confined space. Holmes led, deerstalker brushing cobwebs, his mind racing through deductions. The fire's origin, arson to conceal. Crow's visits post-blaze funding orphan aid as cover. Elias's drowned boy, guilt manifesting in tales that mimicked his remorse. At the bottom, the chamber unfolded. A low vaulted room, perhaps 10 feet square, shelves groaning under stacks of yellowed broadsheets, forms, and galleys. In the center, a crude altar of stacked crates bore a massive printing press, its platen scarred and still, surrounded by flickering candle stubs melted into waxen pools. But it was the walls that seized them, pinned floor to ceiling, every inch covered in broadsheets, chapters 1 through 19, illustrations vivid with garroted urchins, poisoned printers, spectral presses devouring souls. And dominating the far wall, a colossal chapter 20, freshly inked, depicting Elias bound to the press, Holmes's silhouette observing, a noose of type tightening. "Good Lord," Watson breathed, his kind blue eyes widening behind his mustache. "It's a shrine to madness." Elias staggered forward, hollow cheeks draining of what little color remained. "My rejects. They salvaged them, turned my nightmares into gospel. See there, the boy in the Thames panel. That's Jamie, the orphan I—" His voice cracked, the weight of buried confession pressing like the fog above. Holmes circled the press, violinist's fingers ghosting over levers crusted with dried ink. No supernatural pulse, gentlemen, merely human depravity amplified by suggestion. Crow's capital prints these manifestations. Agatha's cult enacts them, selecting victims who match the tales, vagabonds, debtors, those who deserve reckoning. Blackwood's authorship lends authenticity, his guilt, the curse's fuel. Gregson snorted, prodding a stack of sheets with his truncheon. "Neat theory, Holmes, but 18 precise murders, no leads till your printer's rags surfaced." Elias whirled, spectacles flashing. "Rags I burned, or thought I did." Crow, he collected them, said it was for the cause. Funded the orphanage to keep me close. Tempt me back to the pen, every tale I wrote after Jamie. It was penance, drowning my shame in lurid ink. A low scrape echoed from the shadows, a loose panel sliding. All heads snapped toward it. From the niche tumbled a figure, not Agatha, but Mr. Reginald Crowe himself. Immaculate in pinstripe waistcoat despite the grime, a sheaf of fresh galleys in hand. His face, patrician and unlined, twisted into a smile devoid of warmth. "Detective, printer, gentleman. You've found the sanctum, but too late. The reckoning prints tonight." Holmes lunged, but Crowe was swift, hurling a lantern that shattered against the press, flames leaping hungrily up the papered walls. "Fire," Watson roared, grabbing Elias by the collar and hauling him toward the stairs. Gregson bellowed oaths, beating at the blaze with his coat. Holmes paused amid the chaos, snatching a galley from the floor. Chapter 21. The Detective's Folly. Flames consuming reason. Crowe vanished up a side passage, laughter echoing. Elias coughed, smoke stinging his eyes, the heat mirroring the fire that had scarred his soul years before. "I led you here." "My fault." "No," Holmes snapped. Grey eyes fierce through the haze. "Your truth breaks it. Run!" They burst topside into the thinning fog, orphanage windows aglow with alarm. Billy rushed forward, blanket in arms. The flock returns, shouts from the alleys, Agatha's voice rallying. Gregson panted, coat smouldering. "Burned our proof, case slips away." Holmes straightened, mind ablaze with new connections. Not slipped, illuminated. Crowe funds both sides. Orphanage grace masking cult venom. Blackwood's arc from sinner to witness threatens it all. But as dawn's grey light pierced the fog, a horse's frantic clatter approached from Whitechapel, Lestrade's rival, bearing news of a 19th victim. A Fleet Street editor throat-marked with printer's quill. Elias slumped against the ruins, the chamber's inferno raging below, his transformation flickering like the dying candles. Grace demanded more than smash and flight. It required facing the flock's heart. Yet in the distance, Agatha's silhouette reformed on the mist-shrouded bridge, beckoning with a fresh broadsheet fluttering like a white flag of war. The vice tightened. Redemption's path led straight into the tempter's lair. The fog clung to the cobblestones of the Thames embankment, like a shroud unwilling to lift, its chill seeping through Elias Blackwood's threadbare coat as he stared at Agatha's silhouette on the mist-veiled iron bridge. Her broadsheet fluttered in the dawn breeze, the ink stark against the paper. Reckoning complete, justice in every drop. His heart pounded, not just from the smoke still acrid in his lungs, but from the pull of old shadows, the ink that had once been his lifeblood, now calling him home. Holmes strode ahead, deerstalker tilted against the wind, his lean frame cutting through the haze with purpose, while Watson flanked him, revolver at the ready, mustache twitching with unspoken worry. Elias lagged, feet heavy as if chained to the burning press below. Grace had whispered through the flames, Holmes's words a lifeline, "Your truth breaks it." But now, with the orphanage's embers glowing like accusatory eyes, doubt gnawed deeper. He'd printed the tales to survive, to feed the street children who'd become his flock. But each story had bled into reality, 19 souls marked by his fevered imagination. Was this redemption, or just another chapter he couldn't end? Gregson huffed behind, ruddy face smeared with soot, side whiskers singed, bloody cultists playing dress-up in the fog. "We'll drag that witch in, mark my words." But his bluster rang hollow, the Fleet Street editor's body, quill-slit throat echoing the galleys, had shaken even the yard's bulldog. They climbed the bridge's rusted steps, gas lamps flickering weakly in the grey light. Agatha turned as they approached, her form fuller than Elias remembered, cheeks flushed not from cold, but fervour, dark hair pinned under a lace cap stained with printer's blue. "Brother Elias," she said softly, eyes gleaming with that mix of sisterly warmth and fanatic edge. "You've returned to the fold. The children wept for you in the fire, our sanctuary tested, but the reckoning endures." Holmes stepped forward, grey eyes piercing. "Madam, your broadsheets preach judgment. Crowe funds your graces, yet his hands drip with the very ink you decry. Explain the orphanage's ledgers or the yard will." Agatha laughed, a sound like rustling pages, handing the sheet to Elias. "Read it yourself." Chapter 22. The Printer's Lament. His fingers trembled as he scanned the words. his own phrasing twisted, foretelling Holmes's downfall in a Thames plunge. You see, the stories choose their authors. Elias, we built this together, you and I, when the street starved us. Crow merely prints what the divine dictates. Elias crumpled the paper, hollow cheeks tightening. Lies. I wrote to escape, not summon death. The first murder, Jack the Shadow Slasher, mirrored my draft the night I inked it drunk on gin. But you slipped the tales to the killers, didn't you? Feeding the beast for your flock's tithes. Her smile faltered, eyes darting to the river's murmur below, where barges groaned under their loads. Temptation coiled in his chest, the old rhythm of press and plot surging back. Agatha had been his first reader, the urchin girl who'd shared his garret, binding pamphlets by candlelight while he spun horrors to pay for bread. She'd seen his gift when aldermen scoffed, urged him to darken the tales for sales. Now her gaze held that same hunger, promising absolution in surrender. Watson cleared his throat, sturdy frame tense. Miss the editor's corpse was fresh, ink still wet on his desk matching Blackwood's unsiles. Who's pulling the strings? Crow fled the blaze, but you rally here like a general. She straightened, voice dropping to a hush that carried over the water's slap. Ask Elias. He knows the tempter's face. It's his own, staring back from every proof sheet. The reckoning isn't murder. It's prophecy fulfilled. Join us or watch the detective drown as foretold. Holmes's lip curled, but Elias felt the vice squeeze, memories flooding of his rock bottom, collapsed in Whitechapel gutters, galleys soaked in his own vomit, Agatha dragging him to the orphanage cellar that doubled as sanctuary. There, amid ragtag orphans chanting psalms over inky floors, she'd pressed a Bible into his hands, whispering of grace beyond the gin haze. Yet her lessons twisted scripture with plot twists, forgiveness doled out only to those who printed her visions. No more, Elias rasped, voice cracking like dry type. I smashed the press for this, for the dead, for the light Holmes chases. But his words hung frail. The bridge swayed gently, fog thickening, and in the distance, children's voices rose from the orphanage ruins, a hymn warped into dirge. Gregson growled, cuffs glinting. Enough sermonizing. You're nicked, woman. But as he lunged, Agatha melted into the mist, broadsheet trail leading towards Spitalfield's loom-shadowed alleys. Holmes cursed softly, violin-calloused fingers clenching. She's the conduit. Stories flow through her to Crow. Blackwood, your past is the key. What did she make you print in those early days? Elias sank to the iron railing, the cold biting his ink-blackened hands. Thames below churning secrets. Transformation clawed at him, raw and unrelenting. The addict's itch for one more line. The criminal's whisper that redemption was fool's ink. Flashes, his wife's grave in fogged St. Mary's, abandoned for the bottle. The urchins he'd fed but failed, now pawns in Agatha's cult. Grace required confession, yet speaking it aloud would shatter the fragile arc Holmes had ignited. We printed the reckoning first as farce, he murmured, eyes distant. Tales of a printer cursed, murders matching headlines. She said it was jest, but sales soared, and then the Ripper echoes began. She slipped copies to debtors, rivals, goaded them with whispers of fate. Watson gripped his shoulder, blue eyes kind amid the war scars. Courage, old chap, truth's the only solvent. Yet as they descended into the alleys, pursuing her ghost, Elias's steps faltered. A shadow detached from a doorway. Billy, the orphanage lad, no older than 12, face smudged, holding a smouldering proof. Mr. Blackwood, she said, you betrayed us. But I saw the fire. Your hand stayed it from the children. The boy's trust pierced deeper than any blade, a fellow traveller's plea mirroring his own boyhood pleas, unanswered. Elias knelt, gaunt frame folding, the weight of 19 ghosts pressing. Not betrayal, breaking free. Tell me where she goes. Billy hesitated, then pointed to the old haunts. The Black Quill Tavern, where gin and plots had birthed it all. But mind the mark, Crow's men watch. Holmes nodded sharply. We press on. Gregson, rally your constables. Watson, cover the flanks. As they moved into Spitalfield's clamour, looms clacking, hawkers crying wares amid pea-soup fog, Elias felt the tempter's lair yawn open. The tavern's sign creaked ahead, lantern light spilling like spilled ink. Inside, laughter and the thud of tankards promised the old warmth, the escape of story over sobriety. His arc teetered, dive back or stride through to face Agatha amid the wreckage. The door swung, revealing her at the bar, flanked by rough figures, Crow nowhere but his presence thick as smoke. Comment who you suspect, Elias thought wildly. The puzzle's pieces scattering like type. Can you solve it first? No, that was the audience's cry, but in his soul it echoed. Who truly authors the curse, Agatha, Crow, or the sinner holding the quill? Holmes pushed in first, tension coiling like a spring. Gentleman and lady, your tales end tonight. But Agatha raised a glass, eyes locking on Elias. Drink with us, brother. One sip, and the reckoning writes you home. The air thickened with pipe smoke and unwashed wool, patrons murmuring, sensing the storm. Elias's hand hovered over the bar, the smooth glass cool against his palm, gin's promise a siren amid the struggle. Grace flickered, Holmes's unyielding logic, Watson's steadfast hand, Billy's innocent faith, but the dark night descended, demanding he choose, swallow the past, or spit it out forever. Yet as his fingers closed, a child's scream pierced from the back room, another galley unfurling, prophecy igniting anew. The vice clamped shut, the breakthrough hovered, but first the abyss stared back. The child's scream sliced through the haze of the Black Quill Tavern like a compositor's knife through wet paper, raw and piercing, yanking Elias Blackwood back from the precipice. His fingers, moments from curling around the gin glass, froze mid-air, the cool surface mocking his trembling resolve. Agatha's eyes, sharp as typesetting points, flicked toward the back room, her painted lips parting in a snarl that betrayed the mask of camaraderie. Around them, the patrons, dockers with scarred knuckles, seamstresses with calloused palms, shifted uneasily, tankards hovering, the air thick with stale ale, sweat-soaked wool, and the acrid bite of pipe tobacco curling like fog from the Thames. Holmes moved first, his lean frame cutting through the crowd with the precision of a scalpel, grey eyes narrowing under the brim of his deerstalker. Watson was a step behind, sturdy hand instinctively reaching for the revolver concealed in his tweed jacket, his moustache twitching with the old soldier's instinct for peril. Elias stumbled after them, heart pounding against his ribs like a malfunctioning press, the temptation's whisper fading against the urgency. Grace, unbidden, flickered in his chest, not some ethereal glow, but a stubborn spark from Billy's trusting gaze earlier that day, from Watson's quiet nods through sleepless vigils. Inspector Gregson bellowed from the doorway, his burly form filling the frame, frock coat straining over his paunch. "Constables, in here now." His voice boomed over the loom's distant clatter filtering in from Spittlefield's streets, but the room held its breath, every eye on the tattered curtain separating the bar from the shadowed rear. They burst through, Holmes wrenching the fabric aside to reveal a cramped chamber reeking of damp rot and unwashed linens. There, huddled in the corner amid splintered crates and flickering candle stubs, was the boy, Billy, no older than 10, his street-ragged clothes torn further, face streaked with grime and terror. But it was what pinned him that ignited the room's fury. A hulking brute, one of Crow's enforcers, meaty hand clamped over the child's mouth, a crude blade glinting at his throat. The man's eyes bulged with feral desperation, sweat beading on his ruddy brow, as if the very walls whispered accusations. "Unhand the boy," Holmes commanded, voice low and unyielding, a whip crack in the stifling air. The brute snarled, blade pressing a thin line of red against Billy's neck, but Holmes's gaze held him, dissecting intent with that piercing clarity. "You've inked your last page, my man. The stories end here. No more galleys of death spilling from Blackwood's press." Elias pushed forward, knees weak, the sight of Billy's wide eyes mirroring his own orphaned boyhood in Whitechapel's gutters. The child had sought him out days prior, a fellow traveller in the fog of survival, peddling matches and whispers of hauntings that echoed Elias's tales too closely. "Let him go," Elias rasped, voice cracking like old vellum. He's no part of this curse. None of them are. It's me you want. Me and my damned quill." The brute hesitated, glancing toward the bar where Agatha's silhouette loomed, her laughter now a brittle edge. But Watson circled, revolver drawn steady, his kind blue eyes hardened by Afghan sands. "Easy now, lad. Drop it, or we'll make ink of you instead." Gregson lumbered in, truncheon raised, his bushy side whiskers quivering with righteous thunder. In that suspended breath, Elias felt the vice of his life clamp tighter, the tempter's pull not just in Jin or Agatha, but in the wreckage his stories had wrought. 19 souls now, if the boy fell, each murderer page torn from his fevered imagination, the Ripper-like eviscerations, the poisoned heirs, the drowned brides, all manifesting in Whitechapel's gaslit alleys. No superstition, Holmes had insisted from the start, just a human hand guiding the blade. Yet Elias's arc bent here, in the sanctuary of confrontation. The paranoid printer yielding secrets, not to escape poverty's grip, but to loose innocence from his shadow. The brute lunged, blade arcing toward Billy, but Holmes was faster, a blur of deerstalker and ulster, pipe stem jabbing precisely into the man's wrist. The knife clattered free. Watson tackled him to the filthy floorboards, knee grinding into his back as Gregson snapped irons on. Billy scrambled free, collapsing into Elias's arms, the boy's sobs hot against his ink-stained shirt. "It's over," Elias murmured, though doubt clawed his gut. "Is it? The reckoning? Your tale's final chapter. Does it claim us all?" From the bar, Agatha slipped like smoke toward the rear exit, her skirts whispering over sawdust. But Holmes spun, forestalling her with a single stride. "Madam Crow, if that's your game. Your brother's not the author here. You fed the press, planted the proofs, turned fiction to felony for profit's sake." Her eyes widened, hollow cheeks flushing, the spectral gauntness she'd feigned dissolving into venom. "Lies, detective. Elias dreamed it all. His guilt writes the murders." "No," Holmes countered. Calm as a violin string tuned taut, the smudged spectacles, the wild hair, clues enough. You compose the curse's brother or no, using his fears to bait the killers. "Gregson, take her." But as constables swarmed, Agatha spat at Elias. "You'll drink again, brother." The gin calls louder than their grace. They dragged her out into Spitalfield's clamour, fog swallowing her curses amid hawkers' cries and horse-clops. Billy clung tighter, his plea from earlier echoing, "Help us believe it's not cursed." Elias knelt amid the debris, gaunt frame aching, the weight lifting fractionally. "Not cursed, lad. Just men choosing shadows over light." Holmes watched, a rare softening in his aquiline features, detachment pierced. "Well done, Blackwood. The first amends. A child's life spared." Watson clapped Elias's shoulder, mustache lifting in a grim smile. "You've faced the abyss, old chap. Now the wreckage awaits." "Family?" Elias echoed, hollow voice stirring ghosts. "Mine's long dust. But the community, the printers, the urchins, I've harmed them with my lurid lies. No more penny dreadfuls birthing dread." Outside, the pea-soup fog parted briefly, gas lamps casting halos on cobblestones slick with evening drizzle. Gregson puffed triumphantly, ruddy face aglow. "Promotion's ink dries tonight, Holmes," but the detective's eyes scanned the murk, violin case swinging at his side. "Not yet, Inspector. Crow's the puppeteer, 18 dead, but the 19th galley lurks. We track him to Fleet Street's parlours, where tales turn to treason." Elias walked with them, Billy trailing like a shadow redeemed, the black quill's creaking sign fading behind. Inner journey unfurled, from rock bottom's jail cell visions to this tentative stride, effort mingling with unearned mercy. Watson's anchor steadied him, Holmes's logic a lantern, yet temptation lingered, Agatha's words a barb, the old haunts pull like gravity. Deeper into Spitalfields they pressed, Loom's rhythmic thud a heartbeat matching Elias's. At a corner Chandler's, Billy tugged his sleeve. "Mr. Blackwood, will you write hope now? Not horrors." Elias paused, spectacles fogging, the boy's faith a mirror to his fractured soul. "Perhaps, lad, if grace holds." But as they rounded into a narrower alley, fog thickening to blindness, a low chuckle slithered from the gloom, Crow's voice oily as printer's ink. Welcome to the final proof, gentlemen. The vice twisted anew, restoration dangled, but the tempter's final test loomed, quill or blade deciding all. Holmes tensed, hand slipping to his pocket. Steady, the breakthrough nears. But first, the lair. Elias's pulse raced, the struggle's embers flaring. Community's hope flickered ahead. Family wounds to mend, another soul, perhaps Billy's kin, to save. Yet Crow's shadow engulfed them, the dark night yielding to dawn's promise only through fire. In that moment, amidst the chill bite of fog on his skin, Elias chose. Not perfection, but persistence. The print shop of redemption called galleys of light waiting to be set. But Crow's form materialized, gaunt and commanding, enforcers flanking like errant types. The confrontation brewed, souls on the line, grace the only sure press. The fog clung to Elias Blackwood like a shroud woven from his own nightmares, thick and unyielding in the narrow Spitalfields alley, where gas lamps flickered like dying stars against the brick walls, slick with evening drizzle. Crow's silhouette sharpened before them, taller than Elias remembered, his gaunt frame draped in a threadbare greatcoat that hung like raven wings. The enforcers, two burly men with scarred knuckles and eyes dead as printers' lead, at his flanks. Their boots scraped the cobblestones, a sound that echoed the relentless clack of Elias's old composing stick, setting type for tales that now bled into reality. Holmes stood motionless, his lean form coiled like a violin string under tension, grey eyes piercing the gloom. Watson gripped his service revolver beneath his tweed jacket, breath steady despite the pulse hammering in his temples, while young Billy shrank back against Elias's side, the boy's small hand clutching the printer's ink-stained sleeve. Inspector Gregson, further ahead, puffed out his chest, frock coat straining, but even his ruddy bravado faltered as Crow's low chuckle slithered through the mist once more. Ah, the scribbler returns, Elias, and with the great detective in tow. Crow's voice dripped like molten type, smooth yet corrosive, his pale face emerging fully now, cheekbones sharp as guillotines, lips curled in a smile that revealed yellowed teeth. You thought your holy scribbles in that black quill hovel would cleanse you, 18 souls inked by your pen, manifested by mine. The 19th? Yours, unless you hand over the final galley, the one that names me. Elias's heart thudded against his ribs, the weight of Agatha's parting whispers from the tempter's den resurfacing. Write the horrors again, love, for the coin. For us. His spectacles fogged anew, hollow cheeks twitching as memories flooded. The rock-bottom cell in Newgate, visions of his orphaned youth amid Whitechapel's printing presses, galleys prophesying murders he dared not claim. But Grace had intruded there unbidden, through Billy's innocent gaze and Watson's steady hand. Effort had followed. Halting steps from jail to sanctuary at St. Mary's shadowed pews, where Father Harlan's words lingered like clean-set type. No soul beyond the press of mercy. I burned it, Crow. Elias's voice cracked, thinner than the cheap stock he once peddled, but he straightened, feeling Billy's trust anchor him. The tale's end. No more blood for your pulp empire. Crow laughed, a wet rasp that cut the air, stepping closer until the stench of cheap gin and tobacco wafted from him. Burned. Lies from a haunted hack. Those enforcers lunged then, one grabbing Gregson by the collar, the inspector bellowing as his truncheon clattered free. Holmes moved like smoke, dodging a ham-sized fist, his pocketed syringe glinting momentarily, a reminder of his own shadows, before he drove an elbow into the assailant's throat with surgical precision. Watson fired a warning shot skyward, the crack shattering the fog, horses whinnying in distant streets. Billy yelped, pressing into Elias, who shoved the boy behind a rain barrel, his own frail arms trembling. Run to the church. Halad, tell Father Harlan. But Crow was upon him, bony fingers clamping Elias's wrist like a vice, twisting until pain lanced up his arm, ink-blackened nails digging in. You wrote me into this, Blackwood. The strangler's shadow, the ripper's echo, my designs, your words. Fleet Street rejected me, so I made them print in flesh. Join or join the dead. Elias gasped, knees buckling against the cold stone. the alley's chill seeping through his threadbare waistcoat, mingling with the warm trickle of blood from a split lip. Flashes assailed him. His wife's grave in Highgate Cemetery, abandoned for the bottle and the byline. His daughter's distant letters unanswered, wounds festering like uncorrected proofs. Temptation clawed, the old pull to fabricate, to survive in the shadows of gentlemen's clubs where lords devoured his dreads for sport. But Holmes's voice pierced the haze, calm as deduction amid chaos. Your empire crumbles, Crow. The Spittlefield's ledgers we seized from your printers name you. Bribes to compositors, threats to witnesses. 18 murders, yes, but Scotland Yard's net closes. Release him. Gregson wrestled free, cuffing one enforcer with a growl, his side whiskers matted with sweat. You're done, you ink-smeared devil. Promotion or no, I'll see you swing. Crow sneered, shoving Elias sprawling into a puddle that splashed icy filth across his spectacles. Holmes lunged, but Crow drew a slender blade from his coat, printer's knife wickedly honed, flashing it toward Billy, who had darted back in terror. No. Elias surged forward, raw desperation lending strength to his spectral frame, tackling Crow to the ground. They rolled in the muck, the knife skittering across cobbles, Elias's mind a whirlwind of fractured galleys, horrors birthed, now slain by choice. Watson hauled Billy clear, the boy sobbing while Holmes pinned the second enforcer, his deerstalker askew, curly hair wild. Crow bucked beneath Elias, spitting curses, but the printer held, fists pounding feebly yet persistently, each blow a rejection of the old ways. Grace and grit intertwined, no instant salvation, but the slow alchemy of amends begun. Get off me, you pious fraud. Crow's eyes bulged, wild hair plastered, the fight draining as Gregson's constables swarmed from the fog, whistles shrilling. Elias rose shakily, helped by Watson's firm grip, the doctor's kind blue eyes meeting his with unspoken approval. You've done it, old chap. The tempter falls. But Crow laughed hoarsely as irons clamped his wrists, enforcers subdued. The final proof prints eternal, Blackwood. Your daughter, she seeks you still in Whitechapel's fringes. Test her forgiveness, if your God's mercy holds. Elias froze. The words a dagger twist. Mary? Alive, not lost to fever as he'd imagined in delirium? The alley spun, fog parting slightly to reveal St. Mary's spire piercing the night, sanctuary beckoning. Billy clung to him, the boy's warmth of fellowship forged in struggle, while Holmes dusted his coat, violin case retrieved, his piercing gaze softening fractionally. Watson clapped Elias's shoulder. Family awaits mending, Elias. Effort first, then grace. Gregson hauled Crow away, triumph bellowing into the murk. Fleet Street safe, for now. Yet as they emerged onto the broader street, lamps casting golden pools amid the drizzle, Elias's soul stirred with tentative light. The dark night receded, but reconciliation loomed. Mary's face, imagined yet real, demanding presence over prose. Holmes scanned the shadows, sensing the story's ink not fully dry. Billy tugged his hand. You fought like a hero from your good tales, Mr. Blackwood. Elias smiled faintly, spectacles cleared, the chill yielding to inner warmth. Heroes falter, lad, but they rise with help. They pressed toward Whitechapel, the Thames murmuring distant secrets, unaware that Crow's whispers had planted one last seed. A shadowed figure watching from a tenement window, Agatha's silhouette, her temptation unquenched, plotting to lure Elias back before amends could seal. The restoration teetered, family doors ajar, but the vice's echo lingered. What price for the printer's prodigal return? The gas lamps flickered like hesitant prayers along Whitechapel's Bucks Row, casting elongated shadows that danced with the group's footsteps. Elias Blackwood's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against his ribs, each beat echoing the printer's relentless clack of his youth. The air hung heavy with the stench of uncollected refuse and coal smoke, mingling with the faint, briny whisper of the Thames not far off. Billy's small hand gripped his tighter, the boy's breath coming in excited puffs, while Watson walked steadily beside them, his cane tapping a reassuring cadence on the slick cobbles. Holmes led, his deerstalker pulled low, pipe clenched between teeth, eyes scanning the murk as if the fog itself concealed clues. Ahead loomed the cramped tenement at number 17, its sagging facade a testament to years of neglect, peeling plaster scarred by rain, windows patched with oilcloth that glowed dimly from within. This was no grand reconciliation hall, but the ragged hearth where Elias had once spun tales for his daughter before the ink of ambition drowned his soul. Mary. Alive. The word from Crow's venomous lips twisted in his gut like a rusted blade. Fever had claimed her. He'd convinced himself in opium haze, a convenient grave for his guilt. Now the door loomed, paint chipped like flaking hope. Holmes paused at the threshold, turning with that piercing grey gaze. Blackwood, composure is your ally. Faces reveal more than words in such moments. Elias nodded, spectacles fogging slightly, his ink-stained fingers trembling as he raised a knock. The sound echoed hollowly, swallowed by the night. The door creaked open, revealing a young woman in her early 20s, her frame slender as a willow, dark hair pinned severely, eyes, green like his own, widening in shock. Mary Blackwood stood there, apron dusted with flour from some late baking, the scent of fresh bread wafting out like an unintended mercy. Father. The word escaped her lips as a whisper, laced with disbelief and something sharper, a remnant of betrayal. Elias's throat tightened, words failing him. Mary, the years, the stories. He stepped forward, but she recoiled half a pace, arms folding protectively. You've been gone 7 years, chasing phantoms in print. Letters from Fleet Street ghosts, then nothing. Mother died believing you lost to the devil's ink. Billy peeked around, his urchin face breaking into a grin. She's real pretty, Mr. Blackwood, like in your redemption yarns. Mary's gaze softened fractionally at the boy, then hardened on Elias. And who's this circus? The detective from the papers? Holmes inclined his head politely. Sherlock Holmes at your service, miss. Your father has unravelled a peril that threatened us all. Truth demands amends now. She hesitated, the internal war plain on her face, anger warring with the ache of absence. Community whispers reached me, of churches praying for the prodigal printer. St. Mary's vicar spoke of grace unearned, but effort? You've much to prove. Stepping aside, she allowed entry into the narrow parlour, where a single oil lamp bathed threadbare furniture in warm amber. A Bible lay open on the table, pages worn from seeking solace amid poverty's grind. Watson settled Billy by the hearth, offering a biscuit from his pocket, the doctor's kind blue eyes conveying quiet solidarity. Elias sank into a chair, the wood groaning under him, as Mary poured weak tea, hands steady but knuckles white. Tell me plain, she said, voice steadying. Crow's men dragged you back to shadows, Holmes interjected smoothly, deducing from the tremor in her paw. Your uncle's web ensnared many, including this household. Blackwood severed it tonight at peril to himself. Mary's eyes searched her father's face, tracing the hollow cheeks, the wild greying hair now tamed. The tales you wrote, murders mirroring life, demons or delusion? Elias leaned forward, voice raw. Both, child. Pride birthed them, isolation fed the curse. But light pierced, friends here, and your memory, faint as it was. I thought you gone, fever's thief. Crow lied to torment. A tear traced her cheek unbidden. I survived, working seamstress shifts, praying you'd return changed. Mother forgave before passing, said grace covers all stains, but I must see it in deeds, Billy piped up, crumbs on chin. He fought the bad man, Miss Mary, like David slinging at Goliath. Laughter bubbled unexpectedly from her, breaking the tension like dawn through fog. Holmes paced, violin case at his feet, mind evidently elsewhere. Yet the ink's echo persists. Crow spoke of Prince Eternal, loose sheets perhaps circulating. Watson nodded gravely. Rest now, Elias. Dawn brings clarity. But as warmth seeped into Elias's bones from the tea, a shadow stirred at the window. Agatha Crow, no bloodkin but venomous aunt by marriage to the fallen tempter, her silhouette gaunt against the glass. She rapped softly, slipping in uninvited. Shawl clutched like a shroud, eyes gleaming with calculated hunger. Elias Blackwood, the prodigal, returns. Fleet Street misses your fire. Uncle's empire crumbles, but my salons host printers bold. Riches await, tales to eclipse the Ripper's lore. Mary stiffened, rising. Aunt Agatha, not here, your poison's poisoned enough. Agatha sneered, circling like a raven. Child, naivety blinds. He needs coin for your comforts, not sermons. Elias, recall our nights scripting horrors that sold? The vices thrill, crowds devouring your damnation. The room tensed. Billy shrinking back, Watson's hand on revolver subtly. Holmes's eyes narrowed, deduction flashing. Madam, your silhouette betrayed you earlier. Blackwood rejects temptation's chain. Agatha laughed bitterly. Test him then. One final print. My salon offers patronage free of Scotland Yard's leash. Mary's hand found Elias's, cool yet firm. Choose, father. Bread from grace or gold from graves? Elias's soul roiled, the old hunger gnawing, the clatter of presses, adulation's rush masking emptiness. Ink called, promising escape from this humble fire. But Mary's grip anchored him. Billy's trusting eyes pleaded. Watson's nod urged. Holmes watched unblinking. Grace and effort, he murmured, echoing words from St. Mary's pulpit long ago. No, Agatha. Stories end. Life redeems. She recoiled, hissing. Fool. The streets will reclaim you without me. Slamming the door, her footsteps faded into fog. Silence fell, heavy yet purifying. Mary squeezed his hand. First step taken. Stay. Help mend. Elias exhaled. Burdens lightening fractionally, the parlour's lamplight seeming brighter. Yet Holmes straightened abruptly, retrieving a crumpled broadsheet from his pocket, Crow's parting gift, unnoticed till now. A fresh tale circulates. The printer's ghost haunts Whitechapel. Murders resume at dawn? Watson's face paled. Gregson's men missed something. Billy yawned, innocence unbroken. Heroes finish the book, right? Elias rose, resolve hardening. Not alone. The final test beckons, ink or light. As they gathered coats against the chill, St. Mary's bells tolled midnight, a solemn call to vigilance. Reconciliation dawned fragile, but shadows stirred anew in the alleys, whispers of unfinished prose threatening to bleed into reality once more. The vice loosened, yet one coil remained. What phantom murder would manifest before amends sealed? Fog clung to the cobblestones like a shroud as they stepped from Mary's modest parlour in Spitalfields, the midnight tolling of St. Mary's bells vibrating through the chill air. Elias Blackwood pulled his threadbare coat tighter, the damp seeping into his bones, mirroring the unease twisting in his gut. The broadsheet Holmes clutched crackled faintly, its crude woodcut depicting a spectral figure looming over Whitechapel's alleys, the headline screaming of a printer's ghost risen to claim more souls. 18 dead now, the tally mocked in bold ink, and dawn loomed with the promise of another. Holmes strode ahead, his deerstalker casting a sharp shadow under gas lamps, flickering like dying stars. Watson kept pace, revolver heavy in his pocket, eyes scanning the murk for footpads or worse. Mary walked arm in arm with Elias, her presence a quiet tether, while young Billy trailed, clutching a lantern that bobbed like a will-o'-the-wisp. We must reach Blackwood's old print shop before Gregson's blunderers trample the scene, Holmes said, voice clipped, analytical even in haste. This new tale speaks of a haunt in Miller's Court, precisely where the Ripper's shadow once fell heaviest. Elias's heart stuttered. Miller's Court, the very warren where his earliest dread tales took root, penned in fevered nights to feed starving mouths. He'd spun yarns of vengeful shades there, ghosts birthed from urchin fears and gin-soaked whispers. But this ghost printer, not his handiwork. Agatha's venom, no doubt, twisting his legacy into fresh bait. Father, Mary's voice cut soft through the fog, you rejected her. Hold to that light now. Billy glanced up, eyes wide. Is the ghost real, Mr. Holmes, or just bad ink like you said? Holmes paused at a crossing, nostrils flaring as if scenting clues in the Thames's fetid breath. Ink, lad, always leads back to the quill. But superstitions breed killers bolder than phantoms. Press on. They plunged deeper into Whitechapel, horse hooves clattering distant, a drunkard's lament echoing off grimy walls. Elias's mind raced, fragments of old stories resurfacing, apparitions dragging sinners to ink-black abysses. Had his words cursed this place, or merely mirrored the rot already festering? The print shop loomed at last, its signboard swaying creakily, Blackwood's pennies of peril. Boards nailed hasty over shattered windows, door ajar as if inviting doom. Holmes slipped inside first, pipe stem clenched between teeth, striking a lucifer match that flared yellow against peeling walls stained by years of spilled typewash. The air reeked of damp paper and metallic tang. Blood. Elias followed, throat tightening at the familiar press, silent now, its levers like skeletal fingers. Memories flooded, nights hunched here, Mary as a girl asleep in the corner while he chased sails with macabre visions. Watson lit lanterns, beams cutting through dust motes dancing like lost souls. There, Holmes pointed to a fresh broadsheet pinned to the press with a bloody thumbtack. The printer's ghost haunts Whitechapel. A gaunt figure, spectacles askew, strangling a newshawker in Miller's Court at first light. Elias leaned close, fingers tracing the text. This script. It's mine, the flourishes, the rhythm. But the plot, ghostly printer avenging unpaid debts. I never wrote that. Billy whimpered, pressing against Mary. Look, blood on the floor. A dark pool gleamed near the composing table, footprints smudged toward the back alley door. Holmes knelt, magnifying glass glinting, inhaling deeply. Fresh, not 12 hours old. Human, arterial spray minimal. Victim fought back. Gregson will bungle this, Watson muttered, but if murder's a line. Elias, did Agatha have access? She held keys once, Elias admitted, voice hollow. Patroness in my desperate days, funding runs for a cut of thrills. But this forgery mocks me. Resolve flickered in his chest, fragile as St. Mary's candlelight. No more feeding the beast. Holmes rose swiftly. Then we beat her to the court. If the tale manifests, we witness or prevent. They hurried out, fog thickening as if conspiring, streets emptying save for a lone constable nodding drowsily. Miller's Court huddled in squalor, tenements leaning like weary drunkards, privies overflowing into gutters. Gas jets sputtered low, casting elongated shadows. Holmes led to number 13, door splintered, murmurs from within, Gregson's gravelly bark. Inside, chaos, burly coppers milling, flash photographers' powder popping like gunfire. Gregson whirled, side whiskers bristling. Holmes, you ferret again? Victim's a hawker, throat crushed, spectacles beside him. Printer's mark, eh? Crowd outside bays for Blackwood's head. Elias shrank under stares, Mary's hand steadying him. Not me, Inspector. Look to Salon vipers. Holmes ignored the bluster, crouching by the body. A wiry man, face purpled, ink-smudged fingers clutching a crumpled penny, dreadful. Blackwood's own ghost of the press. Deduction cascaded in Holmes's mind, spoken aloud like violin notes. The spectacles are Elias's spares, planted. Footprints match Agatha's heeled boots, narrow French import. The broadsheet's ink, fresh from Blackwood's shop, but paper stock from Fleet Street elites. She's escalating, forcing Elias's return by framing his resurrection. Gregson grunted, ambitious eyes narrowing. Proof. Holmes withdrew the pocket broadsheet. Circulated pre-dawn predicts this exact tableau. Agatha prints ahead, murders to match. Watson nodded gravely. She's the tempter incarnate, pulling strings from shadows. Elias stared at the corpse, bile rising. This man peddled my tales, kept my family from debtor's jail. His death. My shadow. Guilt clawed, but Mary's whisper pierced. Shadows flee light. Father? St. Mary's taught us that. Grace claims even haunted souls. Billy tugged his sleeve. You're the good printer now, helping Mr. Holmes. Holmes straightened, grey eyes piercing Elias. Your choice echoes here. Flee to old vices, or forge amends in truth. Elias met the gaze, spectral gauntness firming. Truth. But how to corner her? Holmes smiled faintly, rare warmth. Her salon hosts a midnight soirée. Invitation slipped in Watson's coat earlier. We attend as ghosts ourselves. Dawn crept grey as they departed the court, Gregson grumbling orders. Elias walked taller, Mary's arm linked, Billy chattering of heroic printers. Yet fog whispered doubts, Agatha's laugh haunting alleys. The salon beckoned, gilded trap for the final unravelling. But as they neared St. Mary's spire piercing the mist, a urchin's cry halted them. A fresh body in the vestibule steps, broadsheet fluttering, the ghost claims a saint. Elias's blood chilled. Church desecrated. Holmes's pipe dropped ash. She struck sanctuary. Run! The group surged toward the holy ground. Bells silent now. Only the fog's hush and thudding hearts. Inside St. Mary's, Reverend Hale knelt by the fallen sexton, throat marked same as the hawker, Elias's stolen spectacles mocking from the floor. Community gasped, parishioners huddled, faces pale in candle glow. This ends tonight, Elias vowed inwardly, the vice's final twist demanding confrontation. Grace urged him forward, effort stealing his step. But Agatha's web tightened. What patron secret would she unveil in the salon to shatter redemption's fragile dawn? Watson's revolver clicked ready, Holmes's mind whirring plots. Elias glanced at Mary, her nod fueling fire long banked. The print shop's ghosts yielded, now the salon's serpent awaited. Yet as they planned the infiltration, a carriage rattled past, silhouette within unmistakably hers, beckoning with gloved hand or warning of deeper snares. Resolution teetered, ink and blood converging, one soul's transformation hinging on the morrow's revelations. Shadows clung, but light from St. Mary's windows promised more than mere gas, perhaps absolution, if they endured the coil's last bite. The fog clung to the vestibule steps of St. Mary's like a shroud unwilling to lift, its chill seeping through Elias Blackwood's threadbare coat as he knelt beside the sexton's body. The man's throat bore the same cruel mark, a thin line from Agatha's poisoned quill, disguised as theatrical flair, and Elias's own spectacles lay discarded nearby, glinting mockingly in the candlelight from Reverend Hale's trembling hand. Elias's fingers, still ink-stained despite days of resolve, hovered over the lenses, a ghost of his former paranoia rising. This was no random strike. Agatha had desecrated the one place that had begun to feel like sanctuary, twisting his path to redemption into another chapter of her macabre narrative. Holmes crouched opposite, his hawkish eyes dissecting the scene with clinical detachment, pipe clenched between teeth. Watson stood sentinel at the door, revolver half drawn, while Gregson barked orders to constables sealing the perimeter, his ruddy face flushed with fury. Mary hovered near Elias, her hand steady on his shoulder, a quiet anchor amid the parishioners' murmurs. Billy, the urchin lad they'd pulled from the alleys, clutched a crumpled broadsheet, eyes wide as saucers. She's mocking us all, Elias thought, the weight of 18 dead pressing on his chest, like the presses of his old Whitechapel shop. But no longer would he flee into vice or delusion. Grace had pulled him from the abyss, Reverend Hale's sermons, Mary's forgiveness, Holmes's unyielding logic, and now effort demanded he strike back. Holmes straightened, voice low and precise. We move at dusk. The midnight soiree at Blackwood Manor, Agatha's lair on the edge of Mayfair. Invitation secured. Watson, you and Gregson take the front as invited dignitaries. Elias and I slip in through the servants' entrance. Mary, Billy, remain here with Hale. Guard the flock. Gregson snorted, wiping sweat from his bushy whiskers. And if she's there poisoning the punch, my men will have her in irons before the clock strikes 12. Elias rose, spectacles retrieved and tucked away, a talisman now rather than curse. She'll talk first, confess how my tales became flesh, her patron's secrets fueling the murders, my words her unwitting script. Mary squeezed his arm, her kind eyes reflecting the vestry's warm glow. Be careful, Elias. You've come so far. Don't let her drag you back. He nodded, the simple touch igniting a fire long smothered by laudanum haze and isolation. For the first time, his gaunt frame felt solid, spectral weariness yielding to purpose. As twilight bled into the pea soup fog, the carriage bore Holmes, Watson, Elias and Gregson toward Blackwood Manor. No relation to Elias, a sprawling Georgian pile leased by Agatha from some absent lord. Gas lamps flickered along the drive, casting elongated shadows that danced like characters from Elias's penny dreadfuls. The air hummed with anticipation, violins drifting from open windows where silk-gowned guests mingled, oblivious to the noose tightening. They disembarked amid clinking glasses and laughter, Watson adjusting his tweed suit, moustache twitching with nerves. Gregson, in ill-fitting finery borrowed from a yard contact, puffed his chest. Holmes, deerstalker swapped for a silk topper, blended seamlessly, grey eyes scanning for traps. Elias lagged, heart pounding as memories flooded, his first meeting with Agatha in a Fleet Street parlour. Her raven hair and velvet voice promising publication, escape from poverty. She'd twisted his orphan tales into sensation, but when predictions eerily matched real crimes, paranoia set in. Now he knew. Her network of spies fed him details. Then she orchestrated the deeds to boost sales, framing him as cursed. Servant's door creaked open at Holmes's subtle signal. Inside, scullery heat enveloped them, roasting meats, clattering pots, steam thick as Whitechapel's smog. A maid glanced up, startled, but Holmes's hypnotic gaze quelled her. Upstairs, through shadowed corridors lined with gilded mirrors reflecting their tense faces, they emerged into the salon proper, a cavern of opulence, crystal chandeliers dripping light, Persian rugs muffling footsteps, walls papered in blood-red damask. Guests swirled, lords, actresses, rival authors, sipping champagne laced with intrigue. Agatha held court by the fireplace, statuesque in emerald gown, laughter like shattering glass. Holmes murmured to Elias, "Observe." Her patron, the thin man with the monocle, Lord Harrington, "Your tale of the vanishing Viscount matches his embezzlement scandal." Elias's pulse raced, hollow cheeks flushing. "And the hawker's death, my street phantom story." She killed to silence leaks. They wove through the throng, Watson engaging Gregson in feigned banter near the punch bowl. Elias's wild greying hair drew a few stares, but Holmes's presence warded them off. Closer now, Agatha's perfume, jasmine laced with something sharper, wafted over. She turned, eyes locking on Elias, lips curving in predatory delight. Elias Blackwood, the ghost made flesh. "Come for an encore?" Her voice dripped honeyed venom, drawing nearby heads. Elias stepped forward, voice steady despite the vice grip of old fear. "No more games, Agatha. 18 dead. My story's your blueprint. Confess, or Holmes here unravels it all." Guests tittered, mistaking it for theatre. Holmes interjected smoothly. "Madam, your flair for drama is renowned, but Scotland Yard tires of encores. The sexton's mark matches your quill. Ink from Spitalfields, rare blend." Agatha's laugh peeled, but her knuckles whitened on her fan. Bold words from a laudanum ghost. "Perhaps your next tale ends in irons. Yours." Tension coiled as Gregson loomed, hand on cuff where his revolver hid. Watson scanned exits, revolver heavy in pocket. Elias felt the room's eyes, the weight of his past, street urchin to accused murderer, crashing back. Yet Mary's nod from memory steadied him. Community had claimed him. He would not shatter. A hush fell as Lord Harrington approached, monocle glinting. "What's this?" "Blackwood's curse at my soirée." Holmes seized the thread. "Your Grace, the vanishing Viscount, fled to avoid debts or silenced by a certain printer's patron." Harrington paled, Agatha interceding with a gloved hand. Lies, all sensation fiction. But Elias pressed, voice rising, fiction that breathed. "The church sexton, your spy who balked." My spectacles planted. "End it, Agatha. Grace offers mercy if you yield." Her eyes flashed, true fury beneath the mask. "Grace, from a wretch like you," she snapped her fingers. Footmen materialized, burly shadows. Chaos erupted, guests gasping, Gregson drawing iron, Watson firing a warning shot into the ceiling, plaster raining. Holmes lunged for Agatha's reticule, quill tumbling free, stained crimson. Elias grappled a footman, fists flying with surprising vigor, redemption fueling blows once dulled by vice. Agatha fled toward a side door, skirts swirling, but Holmes anticipated, blocking with unerring grace. "Cornered," she hissed. "You think this ends me? My web spans Parliament." Your tales were kindling. The real fire burns higher. Gregson snapped cuffs, constables swarming from the hall. Yet as they dragged her, she twisted toward Elias, whispering so only he heard. The final chapter's yours, printer, but the demon in your ink lives. Interrogations began in a cordoned parlour, Harrington crumbling first, confessing bribes to bury scandals, Agatha's manipulations exposed. Elias watched, chest heaving, as Holmes pieced the mosaic. Her spy ring feeding crimes to his press, murders to heighten dread, framing him for the curse. Dawn filtered through lace curtains, fog lifting outside. Watson clapped Elias's back. You've done it, man, truth prevails. But Elias's triumph soured. Reverend Hale's telegram arrived. Mary and Billy safe, but a scrawled note pinned to the church door. The ghost writes on. Agatha's doing, or accomplice unbound? Holmes frowned, pipe relit, one thread loose. The true architect. Elias's resolve hardened amid exhaustion. No rest yet. The print shop's secrets remain, ledgers hidden, perhaps naming the last patron. But as Gregson hauled Agatha away, her parting glare promised coils unsevered. Redemption's path wound tighter, demanding one more descent into shadowed presses where his transformation faced its fiercest test. What final tale would emerge from the ink? The gas lamps flickered like dying stars along Whitechapel's crooked lanes, casting elongated shadows that danced with the swirling fog. Elias Blackwood trudged beside Holmes and Watson, his boots splashing through puddles that reeked of sewage and stale gin. Gregson followed at a distance, barking orders to his constables, his breath puffing white in the chill dawn air. Elias's hands trembled not from cold, but from the weight of Agatha's whisper echoing in his skull. The demon in your ink lives. For years he'd fed that demon, churning out tales of gore and ghosts to line his pockets, blind to how they twisted into reality. Holmes moved with predatory silence, his hawkish eyes scanning every doorway, every huddled figure in the gloom. Watson gripped his revolver tightly, the metal warm against his palm, his moustache twitching with unease. They reached Blackwood's printworks, just as the first cart rumbled past, its wheels grinding over cobblestones. The shop loomed, a squat brick edifice wedged between a pawnshop and a gin palace, its sign creaking mournfully. Elias Blackwood, purveyor of penny thrillers. Elias fumbled the key into the lock, the iron biting his ink-stained fingers. Inside, the air hung heavy with the acrid tang of fresh ink and damp paper, mingled with the faint rot of discarded proofs. Compositors' trays lined the walls, type blocks scattered like fallen teeth. He lit a lantern, its flame sputtering to life, illuminating cobwebs thick as veils, and stacks of unbound sheets yellowed with age. We start in the back, Elias muttered, his voice rough as sandpaper. The ledgers, hidden under the floorboards by the press. Agatha never knew the full extent. I kept some accounts private even from her spies. Holmes knelt without a word, prying up a warped plank with his penknife. Dust motes swirled in the lamplight as a leather-bound volume emerged, its pages warped and brittle. Watson peered over his shoulder, the glow catching the worry lines etched deep in his face. Elias watched, heart pounding, a sour taste rising in his throat. These weren't just numbers, they were his sins catalogued, payments from shadowy patrons for stories tailored to their whims, crimes disguised as fiction. Holmes flipped through, his long fingers tracing entries. Here, Lord Harrington's initials beside a tale of poisoned heirs, and this, a shipment to Parliament cellars, tales of scandal synced with real bribes. But this one... His voice trailed, eyes narrowing. An unmarked patron, payments escalating last Michaelmas. Initials. J.H. not Harrington. Someone higher. Elias leaned in, breath catching. J.H. James Harrington was her puppet, but... His mind raced back to dimly lit parlours, a gentleman with a silver cane and a voice like velvet poison, commissioning the darkest yarn yet, the ghost printer's final rampage. I'd thought it fancy, a lark to sell copies, but if those stories birthed murders... A floorboard creaked overhead. Watson's hand flew to his revolver. Gregson whirled, meaty fists clenched. Upstairs, the garret. Elias's stomach knotted. His old composing room, abandoned since the curse took hold. They ascended the narrow stairs, treads groaning underfoot. The garret reeked of mildew and neglect, moonlight slanting through a cracked skylight onto a chaos of paper and type. In the center stood a figure, silhouetted against the pallid glow, a wiry man in a threadbare coat rifling through a desk. He spun at their approach, face gaunt, under a low-brimmed hat, eyes wild with cornered rat desperation. "You," Elias breathed, recognition slamming like a compositor's mallet. "Jem Hawkins, my old apprentice, the one who vanished after the first death." Jem snarled, backing toward the window. A ledger clutched to his chest. "Boss, it weren't me. Agatha promised riches, said the tales would make us kings, but the ghost, it wrote itself. I just set the type." Holmes stepped forward, voice calm as a surgeon's scalpel. "The ghost was ink and greed, Hawkins. You fed Blackwood stories to her network, details of victims, timings. The murders followed because you made them prophecy." Jem's laugh cracked, bitter and broken. Prophecy. It was her game, and that lord, J.H. Alm, the puppeteer. He pulled strings from Mayfair, using us slum rats to topple rivals. Parliament secrets, scandals buried in blood. I was gonna expose 'em, take the lot. Elias surged forward, fists balled, the fire of redemption blazing in his veins. "You betrayed me, boy. My family fled because of your poison pen. Mary, little Billy. They hid in Hale's church praying for a father I wasn't." Jem lunged, ledger swinging like a club. Chaos exploded, Watson tackling him mid-air, Gregson piling on with a bellow. Holmes dodged, snatching papers that fluttered free. Elias grappled for the volume, their struggle tumbling across the floor amid splintering crates. Jem's knee drove into Elias's gut, air exploding from his lungs. Visions flashing, his own hands, once steady on the press, now trembling with the urge to strike back, to drown the boy in the Thames as his tales had drowned innocence. "No," Elias gasped, pinning Jem's arms. "Not like this." Reverend Hale's words echoed. "Grace for the fallen, even urchins like us. Yield, Jem. Tell the truth. And maybe mercy finds you." Jem stilled, chest heaving, tears carving tracks through grime. "It's too late, Gov. J.H. knows you're here. The note on the church door? His warning. He's coming, for all of us." Gregson hauled Jem up, cuffs biting into wrists. "Scotland Yard'll squeeze the name from you." Holmes examined the snatched pages, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. James Hargrove, Under-Secretary for Home Affairs. J.H. the architect pulling Agatha's strings from the shadows. His mansion overlooks the Thames, Sanctuary House. Watson wiped sweat from his brow, revolver holstered but ready. Then we end it there. But Elias... "You all right?" Elias slumped against the wall, ribs aching, soul raw. The ink on his fingers felt like chains loosening, yet heavier. I'd glimpsed it, the thrill of the macabre, how it warped me. But tonight, facing Jem, I chose different. For Mary, for Billy, for the man Hale saw beneath the vice. Dawn crept higher, painting the garret in reluctant gold. Holmes pocketed the evidence, his detachment cracked by a rare flicker of approval in his eyes. One more shadow to banish Blackwood. Hargrove's web unravels at Sanctuary House. But tread carefully, the desperate clutch hardest. As they descended, Elias paused at the press, running a hand over its cold metal. No more ghosts from this beast. Yet in the quiet, a whisper persisted. What if the demon lingered, inked into his very blood? Hargrove awaited, and with him the final judgment, not just for crimes but for the storyteller who'd birthed them. The Thames-side confrontation loomed, where redemption would be forged in fire or drowned in fog. The fog off the Thames clung like a shroud as the hansom cab rattled toward Sanctuary House, its lanterns cutting feeble paths through the murk. Elias Blackwood huddled in the back, the chill seeping through his threadbare coat, mirroring the dread coiling in his gut. Beside him, Watson gripped his revolver, eyes scanning the shadowed riverbank where derelict barges groaned against their moorings. Holmes sat opposite, pipe clenched between teeth, his gaze distant yet predatory, piecing together the final threads of Hargrove's design. Gregson squeezed in last, muttered oaths about tardy constables, his bulk shifting uneasily. Sanctuary House loomed ahead, A neo-Gothic monstrosity perched on the embankment, its turret stabbing the low sky like accusatory fingers. Gas lamps flickered along the wrought iron gates, casting elongated shadows that danced mockingly. Elias's pulse quickened. This was no mere mansion, but a fortress of privilege, where men like Hargrove spun fates from armchairs, while printers like him bled ink in garrets. The air reeked of brackish water and coal smoke, the Thames whispering secrets below, its current a relentless pull toward oblivion. They disembarked silently, Holmes signaling for discretion. No storming the gates, too theatrical, too predictable. Instead, they slipped along the ivy-choked wall, Watson boosting Elias over first. His ribs protested from Jem's earlier blows, each breath a stab, but he dropped into the manicured gar. Dawsins, thorns snagging his trousers like vengeful spirits. The others followed, Gregson grunting as he landed. Moonlight pierced the fog sporadically, illuminating rosebeds trampled underfoot, statues of weeping angels frozen in eternal vigil. Inside, through a servant's door left carelessly ajar, Holmes noted the smudged latch, fresh oil, they crept down flagstone corridors. The house breathed opulence, Persian rugs muffling steps, walls lined with leather-bound tomes and oils of stern ancestors. Yet beneath the polish lurked decay, mold in the corners, a faint metallic tang like blood, long dried. Elias's fingers brushed a side table, tracing a silver inkwell, and memory surged. His own press, birthing horrors that now stalked these halls. Voices drifted from the study ahead, low and cultured. Holmes pressed a finger to his lips, peering through the cracked door. James Hargrove stood by the fireplace, tall and imperious, in velvet smoking jacket, his patrician face framed by silver wings at the temples, grey eyes cold as slate, fixed on a trembling maidservant. Agatha, Elias realized with a jolt, her once vibrant curls limp. Apron stained, maps and clippings littered the desk. His penny dreadfuls, murders marked in red, a web converging on this room. "You've outstayed your usefulness, Agatha," Hargrove said softly, his voice silk over steel. "The boy, Jem, failed, but Blackwood's meddling ends tonight. The stories were perfect camouflage. Who suspects the scribbler's curse when Scotland Yard chases ghosts?" Agatha's knees buckled. "Please, sir, I only delivered the notes, whispered the tales as you bid, for the coin, for my brother's debts. But the deaths, they weigh on me." Hargrove's laugh was a dry rasp. "Deaths? Progress, my dear. Those slums breed vermin, urchins, printers peddling filth. My reforms clear the rot, the tales inspire the deed. 18 gone, and the Home Office hails my efficiency." Elias's blood roared in his ears. Not fiction. Hargrove had orchestrated it all, commissioning the plots, deploying Jem and Agatha to enact them, framing the curse to terrify and silence. His stories, twisted into murder, had been the blueprint for a gentleman's purge of the poor. Holmes eased the door wider, revolver drawn. "Enough, Hargrove. Your deductions are as flawed as your morality. The ink traces on Agatha's apron match Jem's garret. The forged notes bear your monogram, subtle, but elementary." Hargrove whirled, composure fracturing into a snarl. "Holmes, the meddler, and Blackwood, the fool whose scribbles I elevated. You think exposure ends this? The Thames claims loose ends." He lunged for a desk drawer, but Gregson barreled forward, tackling him to the rug. Agatha screamed, scrambling back as Watson secured her wrists with a handkerchief. Elias stood frozen, the room spinning. His tales, lurid visions born of desperation, had fueled this slaughter. Reverend Hale's sermons echoed, the tongue of fire capable of worlds. Had he invited this demon, inked it into being? Holmes rifled the desk, extracting a ledger, dates, payments to Jem, victims listed like inventory. James Hargrove, Under-Secretary, cleansing Whitechapel for grand designs, tenements razed, the poor relocated or erased. "Your ambition outstrips your cunning," Holmes said coolly. "Gregson, summon your men. This web dissolves at dawn." But Hargrove twisted free, a hidden derringer flashing in his grip. He fired wildly, the shot splintering a bookshelf, volumes cascading like avalanched guilt. Elias dove, tackling Agatha clear as plaster rained. Watson returned fire, grazing Hargrove's shoulder. The man howled, blood blooming dark on velvet. "You can't stop it, Blackwood," Hargrove gasped, staggering toward French doors overlooking the Thames. "The stories live, yours and mine, immortal in blood." Elias rose, heart pounding, the weight of 18 souls pressing. No more. He grabbed a poker from the hearth, advancing. The press birthed shadows, but light scatters them. Yield, Hargrove. Face justice like a man, not a phantom. Hargrove sneered, backing onto the balcony, fog swirling below. Justice? For dreamers like us. He vaulted the railing, vanishing into the night, a splash echoing faintly from the river. Gregson cursed, peering over, gone, swallowed by the tide. Holmes examined the derringer, unfazed. Not suicide. A boat waits downstream. He'll surface elsewhere. But the evidence damns him. Watson clapped Elias's shoulder. "You faced it, old chap. The storyteller chooses the ending." Elias sank into a chair, the poker clattering free. Agatha's sobs filled the room, her confession spilling. Hargrove's promises of reform, twisted into vengeance against the slums that birthed him. Jem, her recruit, an urchin promised escape. Elias saw his reflection, poverty's child, chasing sensation over soul. As constables swarmed, lanterns blazing, dawn broke fully, gilding the Thames in reluctant gold. Holmes pocketed the ledger, his eyes meeting Elias's with rare warmth. "The curse breaks with truth, Blackwood. But one thread lingers. Mary and Billy. Hargrove knew their hiding spot. If he reaches them first." Elias straightened, ribs forgotten, a quiet resolve igniting. "Then we go now. No more running from the ink or the light beyond it." The final pursuit beckoned, towards Spittlefield's heart, where family waited, and redemption demanded one last stand against the shadows refusing to die. The handsome cab rattled over cobblestones, slick with morning mist, Spittlefield's market stirring to life around them like a beast rousing from slumber. Elias Blackwood gripped the strap, his knuckles white. The poker from Blackwood Press traded for a constable's truncheon pressed into his palm by Gregson. The inspector's burly frame squeezed beside him, breath heavy with unspent fury, while Holmes sat opposite, pipe clenched between teeth, eyes scanning the awakening stalls piled with wilted greens and bolts of faded silk. Watson rode shotgun up top, revolver at the ready, the wind whipping his mustache as he scanned rooftops for shadows. Elias's mind raced ahead to the cramped tenement above his old printing shop, where Mary had hidden with little Billy these past weeks. His wife, once radiant in simple muslin, now gaunt from fear. His son, barely 7, with ink-smudged fingers, dreaming of tales beyond the slums. Hargrove's words echoed, immortal in blood. If the madman reached them first, twisting another chapter into carnage. They spilled out at Buck's Row, the air thick with the tang of fish guts and coal smoke from breakfast fires. Holmes led, deerstalker low, striding past costermongers who parted like fog before a gale. Elias's boots pounded familiar paths, past the very alley where his first curse had struck. A printer's boy gutted like a fictional fiend. Heart hammering, he shoved open the sagging door to the tenement stairs, the stench of damp rising like accusation. "Mary, Billy, we're here." No answer. Stairs creaked under their weight, Gregson muttering about warrants be damned. At the landing, the door hung ajar, splintered at the latch. Elias burst through, truncheon raised, into the dim room lit by a single gas jet, flickering like a dying pulse. There, Mary huddled in the corner, arms around Billy, her face ashen, eyes wide with terror. Billy whimpered, clutching a ragged penny dreadful, its cover depicting a shadowy reaper. No blood, no bodies, but the air hummed with violation. On the table, Hargrove's calling card, a smudged page from Elias's own press, inked with "The final chapter, Father pays." "He was here, minutes ago," Mary whispered, voice cracking. "Said you'd bring the end unless I came willingly. Promised Billy safety in exchange." Elias knelt, pulling them close, the warmth of her cheek against his, a lifeline amid the chill. "I'm sorry. For the stories, the secrets, the nights I chased phantoms instead of home. No more ink without light. Holmes circled the room, fingers tracing scuff marks on the floorboards. Recent. He dragged something heavy, westward, toward the market's edge. Gregson barked orders into the street, summoning more men, but Holmes silenced him with a glance. No cordon. We flush him into the open. They moved as one, Mary refusing to stay behind, Billy hoisted on Watson's shoulders like a flag of defiance. Through Spittlefield's labyrinth, past hawkers crying wilted pears and stolen watches, the fog lifting to reveal laundry lines strung like nooses. Elias spotted it first, a flicker of Hargrove's velvet coat vanishing behind Christchurch, the wren spire piercing the sky like judgment. There. He bolted, lungs burning, the group fanning out. Watson scooped Billy higher, Mary running beside Elias, her hand in his for the first time in months. Gregson bellowed, constables converging like wolves. The chase spilled into the churchyard, gravestones tilting like drunken sentinels, overgrown nettles snagging trousers. Hargrove whirled at bay near the crypt entrance, gaunt face twisted. Derringer in one hand, a burlap sack in the other, clinking with lead type, Elias realized. Symbols of their shared damnation. You printers always meddling, Hargrove spat, backing against iron gates. My tales perfected yours. 18 deaths, Blackwood, etched in flesh. The public devours it. Join me, or join them. Elias halted, truncheon loose, seeing not monster but mirror. Another urchin risen by lurid lies, poverty's venom in his veins. We birthed shadows, Hargrove. But light claims its own. Surrender. Courts, not curses. Hargrove laughed, mad and hollow, leveling the gun. Too late. The river waits for fools. Holmes stepped forward, voice silk over steel. Predictable, Mr. Hargrove. Your boat downstream? Spotted at low tide, crew bribed, now in custody. Ledger implicates you thrice over. The game ends. A shot cracked, wild, splintering stone. Gregson lunged, tackling Hargrove amid gravestones, the derringer skittering free. Watson covered Mary and Billy, revolver steady. Elias watched, unmoving, as cuffs clicked, Hargrove's snarls fading to sobs. No. The stories. They live. Holmes retrieved the sack, dumping type into his palm, letters forming redemption, a final taunt or plea. He met Elias's gaze. Yours, Blackwood. Rewrite. As constables hauled Hargrove away, wailing of immortality crushed, the group gathered by the church steps. Sun-breached clouds, gilding the spire, warming stone benches worn by centuries of penitence. Mary leaned into Elias, Billy peeking from Watson's arms, wonder replacing fear. You came back, she murmured, not the hero of tales, but real. Elias nodded, throat tight. The weight of 18 ghosts lifting like fog burned away. Real enough to try. For you, for him. No more dread without hope woven in. Watson clapped his back, eyes misty. Steady on, old man. We've all our shadows. Gregson grunted approval, rubbing his whiskers. Case closed. Promotion be damned, this one's for the innocents. Holmes lingered apart, pipe relit, staring at the Thames' distant gleam. Reason prevailed yet. He trailed off, violin case at his feet unopened, a melody unspoken. Elias turned to him, voice low. You saw it first, the man behind the myth. Thank you. For believing when I couldn't. Holmes inclined his head, rare softness cracking detachment. Potential unrecognized is waste, Blackwood, yours. Illuminated. Days blurred into healing. Blackwood Press shuttered lurid runs, reborn for moral tales, stories of grace amid grime. Elias mended type, Mary beside him, Billy apprenticed under watchful eye. Agatha confessed fully, her urchin recruits scattered to safer paths, Jem among them finding a baker's trade. Holmes and Watson departed Baker Street fashion, but visits grew frequent, chessboards and violins bridging worlds. Gregson rose, grudgingly crediting the detective. Hargrove swung at Old Bailey, his immortal tales reduced to testimony, sentenced to penal servitude where ink meant nothing. Yet Elias knew shadows lingered, not curses, but choices. Nights, he'd wake to Mary's breath steady beside, Billy's soft snores and whisper thanks to the quiet force binding fractures. No instant absolution, but steps toward it. Grace earned in effort, community forged in crisis. One evening, as gas lamps bloomed over Whitechapel, Elias penned his first redeemed chapter by hearthlight. Not dread, but dawn. The printer's hands, once stained with sensation, now traced light. Across town, Holmes pondered a telegram, violins sighing a hopeful refrain. Cases came, but this one lingered, a reminder that deduction pierced not just crime but souls. Spitalfield slumbered under stars, the Thames murmuring secrets dissolved. Redemption, fragile as new type, held. Subscribe for more cases that test your deduction skills.